Rest day is done as the Tour de France now rolls on. 20 riders short since the start in the Vendée region, most of them out with injuries. We're heading now to Carmaux, a first-time finish here in the department of the Tarn, a really beautiful area of France. Let's catch up with what has happened already earlier today, the rollout at the start from Aurillac.
Well, the rain came down just before the start, a massive cloudburst, including some very big hailstorms.
Well, the man who absolutely is the limping hero, 33 stitches for Hoogland there in that polka dot jersey, but he has taken the start, and miraculously the rain stopped just before the riders left. Breakaway forming, as always these days, very early on. These are the 6 riders who are clear, none affecting the yellow jersey, now on the shoulders of Thomas Voeckler, as he'll be back in the peloton. And as the race moved on, I can tell you Levi Leipheimer did fall. It was a very quick start indeed. He's okay, he's back in the main field. Frank Schleck also had problems here as he got a quick wheel change with the back wheel.
Well, very fast over the first few kilometres of the race. No panic at all for Frank Schleck because his teammates waited for him to pace him back into the group.
The sprint coming early before anybody went on television today, and it was won by Arthur Vichot, getting clear here for Française de Jeux. They always put a man in the early breakaway. He won it quite easily from Delaplace and Minard. And this, as I say, coming at 37 kilometres from the start. But the interest, as always, the race for the green jersey from the peloton, and a 1-2 for HTC High Road. A little objection coming in too from the riders and back on the Vacances Soleil team there, Movistar team rather, but nonetheless at the moment it's Cavendish ahead of Renshaw there.
Well, the important thing for them was to block out all of the other riders, and in the breakaway, Phil, just watch this, because Remy de Gregorio at the back there, this is how not to get involved. And what happened there was that rider just touched the wheel of the rider in front, and he was reasonably alert, because let's have a look at it one more time. He actually jumps his gear, and as he moves across there, he manages to keep it upright, and that was Delaplace.
Yes, first timer in the Tour de France, and won't be well received by the veteran there, Remy de Gregorio of Astana, but they held it upright. The weather today is going to be a little bit of rain around at the start, but it's great at the finish. 79 degrees, light winds. The forecast officially is cloudy, but the sun, when it comes through, is very, very hot and humid indeed. All of our beautiful pictures, and there are plenty of those around in the region of the Gorges du Tarn now, available in high definition as we join the action now. What is Philippe Gilbert doing here? He was 11th in the sprint, by the way, today, so he did pick up 5 points for that green jersey competition.
Well, he's been very consistent since the start, and he's one of the rare riders who's actually made a point of saying, I want to win this green jersey. Yep. Mark Cavendish, Tyler Farrar, Thor Hushoff, they've not been talking about it at all. They're just going out to win individual stages. And this man, I say, Phil, is going to be a very difficult man to beat, because once we get into the slightly more mountainous stages, he's got a very good chance of picking up points every day when the sprinters will get left behind.
Well, an absolutely rip start this morning when those 6 riders got clear. It looks as though they've slowed down a little bit at the moment. Riders were going off the back. This is the point standing now after that sprint. Gilbert now has 222. Rojas, who was in the mix too, is still in second place. But as this race unfolds into the mountains, Gilbert might be in the mix there for a few extra points. That's what he's planning on, I would think. Whatever the problem is, it's definitely a real problem, this one. It's not a question of hanging on to the car. It's a question of trying to sort it out. He's not happy with his bike just now.
Oh, he's obviously got something wrong. The mechanics coming up alongside him. It's very strange that the day after the rest day, when riders have so many mechanicals, because the mechanics had spent the whole of the day looking after the machines and tinkering with them to make sure everything was perfect. But this is something that can very often happen.
Incidentally, before the start this morning, the organisation were on the internal race radios giving a big lecture to all of the car drivers in the Tour de France. There are 140 cars get involved on the road with the riders in the Tour de France, and they were told very sternly how they must act in front of the race. This is the Tour de France, continues to really whip up the speed today. We've got these 6 riders clear. They can't really pull too far ahead as we enter the lovely town here of Figeac, where we've had stage finishes before, because the pace behind is so quick.
In fact, on the 14th of July in 2004, a Frenchman won in this town. It was David Moncoutier, way back when he was in a long lone breakaway.
And he's still in the race today, although we've never mentioned his name this year yet. He's still riding in his traditional position as last, and all of a sudden he'll pop out and try and win one of the stages, no doubt.
Well, he has probably got the 14th of July written down, because that's the day when the Tour de France goes right into the heart of the Pyrenees with a finish at Luzardiden. But it's a beautiful little town, the town here of Figeac. In fact, it goes back to Roman times, as we get a quick glimpse there of the church of Saint-Sauveur. That dates back to the 11th century. The original population from around here actually decided to build this church around the abbey, which at the time was under the protection of the Conques.
So we're in now a beautiful region of France. Well, we're always in a beautiful region. It just keeps on changing as far as the regions go just now. But we're heading down towards the Pyrenees now. And these houses here, unusually, having to fend off some rather strange weather conditions this last couple of weeks. We should be baking hot down here now. And when the sun does come out, it is extremely humid. But they've got some heavy storms at the start this morning with hailstones the size of jumping beans. But happily in the dry and the warmth right now. This is Julian Elfarez in the breakaway.
He rides for Team Cofidis. The breakaway made up for pretty much the younger riders of the peloton of the Tour de France. De Gregorio is an extremely good climber. I'm surprised to see him in the breakaway on a day like this. That's him on the far side, number 62. And also Arthur Vichot, who's the nephew of a winner of a stage of the Tour de France, Frédéric Vichot, who at the time was regarded as one of the best downhill racers in the sport.
A massive crowd here in Figeac. It's a region we don't come into that often in the Tour de France. We're about 50 miles north of Toulouse at the moment. We're going steadily closer towards it. Maybe a bit more than that, maybe about 100 miles north. But even so, we're getting closer all the time. And we won't go to Toulouse this year. We'll go around it as we're bound for the Pyrenees. Mercato, who's jumped ahead. We're on the climb of the third category hill out of Figeac. It's the Côte de Figeac, and the crowd has followed us out of town. It's an incredibly big crowd, this one, all of the way. But Mercato has got a couple of points in the King of the Mountains. As it's a third category climb, only the second rider will get points as well. Second over the line there was Anthony Delaplace, so he gets a point in the King of the Mountains competition. Nobody else scores under these new rules. I actually like these new rules, Paul. I think they're making a very exciting King of the Mountains competition.
You know, I think it'll become even more exciting once we start to get into the high points of the race. It was a good move by this man, Phil, as he jumped away from the main field. Again, I think trying to make sure that they keep as many points as possible in the Vacansoleil camp.
Well, that's a very typical move by Marco. He always attacks early, and he's got a fine top end to a turn of speed. So he's the sort of rider who seems to succeed a little bit more than you might expect.
But he's sat up now, waited for the rest of the group to come back and stay with him, and they need to stay together if they want to have any hope of survival on a long breakaway like this. This is actually one of the shorter stages of the Tour, 158 kilometers, just inside of 100 miles of racing. And the main field at the front end is being led mainly by the two teams at Europcar, which is the team of Thomas Voeckler, the overall leader, with a fair amount of assistance coming from HTC High Road.
Julien Elfarez on the far side. French rider on Cofidis. He's chatting with Di Gregorio. Di Gregorio is a good climber, actually. He won the King of the Mountains in the Dauphiné Libéré in 2007, which is the race just before the Tour de France, and he won a stage this year of Paris-Nice, which is the race to the sun in March, from Paris down to the warmth of Nice. So we're 87.9 kilometers from the finish. These two riders just moving slightly ahead here on the climb of the Côte de Lupiac, the second climb of the day. Now the object of the day, to try and defend that polka dot leader's jersey on the shoulders of the limping Johnny Hoogerland, is for the man on the front here to take the 1 point available, and Mercado, because he's on the same team as Johnny Hoogerland, and that'll keep it in the bank. I'm not sure anybody will challenge him, quite honestly, because they've no reason to. They're not going to challenge in the King of the Mountains. And Marco Mercado coming up towards the summit of the Lupiac, and I think, Paul, he's going to get that 1 point for the boys. There he crosses the line, gets his single point. And so he's won both of the climbs now. So Johnny Hoogerland being protected up front in the breakaway by his teammate. And this young man in his first Tour de France, like Johnny Hoogerland as well, so he's getting used to it and riding with great intelligence here. The peloton are all together. The breakaway is not that far ahead. Tyler Farrar said also he's up for it today, and They are really moving today. 32 miles in the first hour of racing. We're heading, it's just well, the peloton have yet to get into that feeding zone where they catch those little bags of food. Then there's a couple of hills before the finish. So the field has decided to turn angry again, and it's HTC High Road. Now, what's happening here at the back? This is the Sayers Sojan team. 211 is their team leader, Jerome Coppel. Now, he crashed early on today. His left leg is giving him some pain.
So is his shoe as well. He's just had an adjustment done to his shoe by the mechanic inside. He obviously wanted to get the cleat tightened up. And don't do this at home, because it's a rather precarious thing to do, to try and change your shoes at about 25 miles an hour.
Yes, and even the big professionals have hit those cars and fallen off under their own volition. 34th overall for Jerome Coppel. He qualifies in the white jersey competition, but he's not high enough yet.
Well, he was the best young rider in the Critérium de Dauphiné just about a month before the start of the Tour de France. They had high hopes from him in the Tour this year, but he really has, I think, battled to find his form.
Yes, he's sitting in 5th place in the best young riders competition, but not far off everybody else, so that could change once we get into the hills.
One or two riders from each of the teams of the sprinters set a false tempo for a certain period of time, and then think about trying to pick up the pace as we get closer to the finish. But the idea here, Phil, really mainly is to peg back the advantage of the 6-man breakaways. Look here at the Chateau de Montbrun.
So we're looking here at the Chateau of Montbrun. This is a ruined fortress castle of the 12th, 13th and the 17th centuries. It's got a keep, a tower and a surrounding wall almost intact there. It's been listed since 1984 as protected monument here in France, and it overlooks a very pretty village which sits right on the side of the river Lot. So
section of the course is going to be the hardest section of the course of the whole of today's stage, and I think that's when we'll see the average speed start to slip down again.
Another massive crowd here for the riders. They really have turned out in huge numbers along the route, especially in this region of the Tour de France and in the Vendée and Brittany areas. But the peloton now are beginning to eat into that lead. 62 kilometres to go. They're going to have to start to chase them down now, but at the moment they've just upped it again to 3 minutes on the next climb now of Villefranche. So we just started the climb of the Côte de Villefranche here. That was where all the cheers of the crowd. This is quite a long climb, this one, so it'll be a little bit of a grind up. And again, watch out for the man who's on the front at the moment to try and steal the points. First and second riders get the points at the top of this climb. That's Mercado setting the pace, then the freewheeling downhill here. So the lead is on that climb of the Côte de Villefranche, and it's a 4-kilometre climb this. That's a 2.5-mile climb. And we can expect to see Mercado trying to steal the points again at the top. But there are 2 riders scored this time because it's ranked as a 3rd category.
Well, they will try and race over that climb. We're now heading very much into the heart of the Aveyron and the gorges of the Aveyron, which is made by the Aveyron River, as we make our way up towards its source at Sévérac-les-Châteaux, which is right in the middle of this department. The river itself is about 250 kilometres long.
Yes, yet another great section of this ubiquitous country of France as the riders snake through. They're on narrow roads now, but looks at Remy Di Gregorio here. He had that little problem. He almost stopped Paul off our camera there, and he's now having to get back. He's really not enjoying this journey in the breaker. There's the problem for you. Chain jammed. I think it was his chain jam.
Yeah, I think he was trying to change from the large chain ring to the small chain ring, and it must have just popped off there. But he's a gangly rider. He reminds me very much of a former teammate of mine, Robert Albon, who finished in 3rd place overall in the Tour many years ago. And you can just see by the way he gets out of the saddle, he looks a bit like a stick insect.
Yeah, I say 4th category, but it's nice and steep. Now we go back to the race here because they're going over the top, and again nobody is challenging here. And Mercado, as he comes through, he gets the 2 points, and that will keep him taking all major points off the rest. The rest don't really feature in the King of the Mountains, so they're not attacking him at all. And Sébastien Minard is the rider who goes over there in 2nd place.
Well, just looking at Marco Marcato there, he's been a professional with this team since 2009, and before that he rode for a small Belgian team, Kolstrop, and he's been a professional since 2005, so he is one of the more experienced riders in the event, but this is his first participation at the Tour. Katusha have also started to assist in this pacemaking. That's because of their youngster, Denis Galamzianov, who I've seen sprint extremely well this year. And I'd like to hear you pronounce his name very quickly if you have to call him winning across the line.
I'm going to leave it to you if it's him. He's a new name in the Tour de France, but he's no longer a new name out in the race now, out in cycling itself. He's been winning a few races this year, and he's made the team, the all-Russian team of Katusha, and he is the sprinter. He doesn't seem yet to have the speed of Mark Cavendish, Tyler Farrar, Pataki, or those, but he's very, very close. And of course, he's a very young rider, so give him a year, and he could be very quick in the Tour de France. Well, I'm looking for the Garmin Cervelo's Tyler Farrar as well. He wears a blue helmet. I saw a couple of blue helmets not too far from the front, so let's hope one of them is Tyler, because I think Tyler will be up for this sort of a finish today, and he's just got to get his team to get him in the right position.
Talking about the blue helmets, I thought you were talking about the United Nations peacekeeping force then.
Well, they could be mistaken for that. In the wrong country at the moment, thank heavens. This is Hushoff, the world champion, at the back at the team car. Having a little bit of a problem with whatever, the brake, I think.
Well, he won't panic, Thor Hushoff, at all. He's one of the most experienced riders on the professional circuit.
Difficult road, though, to do any work on.
It certainly is, and it's difficult to do this this upgrade at about 40 miles an hour because he's going slightly downhill. Thor Hushoff has been a professional since 2000.
He's releasing his shoes here. Now he's got a shoe problem as well. Or is he going to do a bike change?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Position. Anyway, at the front, we'll keep you up to date with the back. Let's have a look at the front as they continue to pursue here. The breakaway now down to exactly 1 minute. This is either going to change shoes or change bikes. He doesn't need to take his shoe off to change a bike. Well, that's very strange. This is the second problem we've had with his shoe today, and here it comes. Right then, won't start the sprint just now. He's got a loose cleat and it's going to be adjusted by the screwdriver. Well, I've seen it all now, Paul. He's riding with one shoe on.
Well, it's the second time today I've seen somebody riding with one shoe on, because Jerome Coppel did it just a few moments ago. But, you know, these guys are so incredibly agile on the bikes. They can do almost anything, fairly acrobatic. He's having a little chat there. And
it reminds me of the start of the Tour de France in Monaco, when Paul and I actually auctioned the shoes of Thor Hushoff for charity in front of Prince Albert. And somebody bought them for quite a high price too. They were the shoes which he used when he crashed in the Paris-Roubaix one-day classic, and they were still covered in mud. So I guess we'll get to auction these off next year somewhere or other, will we?
I think we may well get that opportunity, but for Thor Hushoff, this is a rather tricky moment as he's waiting for the mechanic to get that sorted out as quickly as possible.
The sooner better than later might help, because that peloton's beginning to move away here. With one rest day yesterday, with one more rest day to come, which is next Monday, and by then we might have a different overall classification, because we'll have gone through the Pyrenees and we'll be tickling the Alps, where we celebrate 100 years of introduction of the Alps into the Tour de France. And believe me, the organisers have really given us a lot of the Alps. It's going to be the next disease, I think, a dose of the Alps, because they're big climbs and there's plenty of them.
Well, to get there, you've got to go through the Pyrenees first. You can see the organisation. These guys are really starting to lift it up. They know that the main field is probably charging down behind them at about 40 miles an hour, which is why these guys too starting to whip up that pace, making the 23 kilometres to go to the finish, and make that about 8 kilometres to the top of the climb.
Working well together, but the peloton now constantly changing at the back. The riders taking a chance to move up if they can, because they're also doing now well in excess of 60 kilometres an hour on this descent now, probably nearer 70 kilometres an hour. Looks as though Danny Pate had a bit of a speed wobble on there. They're driving this peloton down the race now. This is when life gets a little bit precarious, when you're following wheels in the middle of the pack, because you're not too sure where you're going to go next. Just look at the speed down there now as they go through the S's of this long descent. So as they continue on, we're not too far away from the finish in real time now, about 22 kilometres, 13 miles to the finish. And when we come back, the big question is, will it be Cavendish or will it be Farrar at the finish? Minutes, slightly less than that, as they race towards the foot of the last climb of the day. Down this mountain, and now they've split the breakaway 3 by 3. Mercato, Vichot and Mina are the three who've gone clear. Well, they're virtually on the climb. They're not quite there. It's a long climb, this, and they go up towards the finish. They've just started it now. 3 by 3. Desperate moments in the breakaway, but it's going to be now because the sprinters won't like being stretched quite so much on this climb. Mark Cavendish, for example, is going to suffer on this climb to hold the peloton.
Well, it depends on whether or not his teammates are the ones still dictating the pace, because what they will do, they will make the pace just hard enough to discourage any attacks to come from the climbers, but just easy enough to hopefully have their two sprinters, Matty Goss and Mark Cavendish, stay in contact. And that the same can be said also for the other sprinters in the race, Hushovd, Farah and Pataki.
Well, they go over the top at around 15 kilometers left to race here, maybe slightly more than that. At 32 seconds, the clock is now saying the first 3 have been caught, so only 3 remain now. I hope they can count in the peloton, because there are 6 of them up front, and never even given them a second glance.
Well, Lars Bak has done a massive job of work. In fact, you can see the long line of the peloton behind. That's because of the pressure these guys are dictating. Moving up now, we've got Omega Pharma Lotto looking after Philippe Gilbert. Gilbert will have to crack away every day to try and get him some points. He's not a pure sprinter, but he has turned out to be a rider who can get himself some sprints at the finish of these stages, and he is motivated to take that green jersey to Paris.
Well, this is what's happening once they've hit the climb here, because this going off the back is Denis Kotchik, the Ukrainian rider on Lamprey. He's gone. And not surprisingly, these 3 boys are hanging on now for dear life. It's a long climb, this, 23 seconds and collapsing. They're going to be all together by the top.
It's 4 kilometers in length here. Once you see the yellow neutral service car being pulled out and the red referee's car being pulled out, you know that the group is starting to come down very quickly. The pace is being done here by Omega Pharma Lotto, and that's probably, Phil, to try and see whether or not they can put enough pressure on this main field to get rid of the sprinters for Philippe Gilbert.
Well,
Vogler, while there's a move coming by Mercato.
Marco Mercato, he will not give up. He also wants the points at the top to take up anybody else getting them. He's done a brilliant job of work to protect the leader in the King of the Mountains. His teammate today, Johnny Hoogerland, he's won all the points, first over every climb. He didn't want the points, but he didn't want anybody else to endanger his teammate. Done a great job.
Well, these 2 guys, they could not take the pressure of that acceleration, so they're going back to the main field.
Yeah, well, they continue to come. It's 11 seconds to Mercato. Still wants the top. It's we did a good job. Now let's go back in the bunch. Mercato, in his first Tour de France, this youngster, riding absolutely brilliant. He's riding with some real talent here for the future. Look at his face now as he tries to survive just to the top of the mountain. He's got a long way to go yet. We haven't seen the 1 kilometer time there. Now let's have a scan through there. Nobody there, was there, that we didn't want to see off the back? No, is the answer to that question. As we're now looking at the front of the peloton, I don't see Mark Cavendish here. This is the plan by Philippe Gilbert. He can sprint, but he's not of the quality of Cavendish. He wants to get more points in this green jersey by getting a high place at the finish.
Hats off, because he's not scared of doing a bit of pain dishing out himself there as he comes up to the front with his green jersey, looks over his shoulder to see what sort of damage they're doing to the peloton. Marco Mercato, Phil, I don't think he has any belief that he can win the stage. He knows how quickly these men are going to come back to him. What he's trying to do is just stay off the front and maybe pick up the last points for the King of the Mountains classification that are available this afternoon.
Well, he's had a great day so far. He's 27 years of age now, in his first Tour de France. He's only won 2 races in his life. And it's his 3rd season on the Vacances Soleil team, and he's riding, but you're right, he's not going to make the top this time.
And look at the damage that Omega Pharma Lotto and Philippe Gilbert have done to the main field. It was almost a complete main field at the bottom of this climb. Now they're down to not very many more than 25 riders.
That's exactly what Gilbert was doing. Get rid of the sprinters. It's completely what we didn't expect. We thought 1 or 2 riders might try to springboard away here, but Gilbert has used the hill to get rid of the sprinters and make a better room for himself at the finish. He's a very clever bike rider. And we're looking deep into the bunch now. Mark Cavendish said if he wasn't there at the finish, then he would expect Matthew Goss to have a go for Team HTC High Road. Gossi wants a stage win in his first Tour de France. He's got a 2nd place so far. I don't think he will be dropped on a climb like this.
Well, King of the Mountains at the start of the day is being dropped here, Phil. There with the polka dot jersey, Johnny Hoogerland having a very hard time. This is the damage that's being done at the rear end of the race, and that's all because of the pressure from Omega Pharma Lotto. They went to the front to see if they could get rid of as many sprinters as possible.
Well, they all got a bit tortuous, but as we see an attack here now, Cofidis are having a little dig here. Just looking at it, looks like Tony Gallopin, who is himself a very good sprinter. If he can keep this group away, Paul, he will probably win the stage, because he's probably the fastest man left in this group.
Just looking at the gap there, those riders starting to scramble back. Race Radio is telling me that 2 sprinters have been left behind. Denis Galimzianov has been dropped from Team Katusha, and also in difficulty is Alessandro Pataki. But look at this move by Philippe Gilbert. He's got the bit between his teeth here this afternoon. Vogler, the man in the yellow jersey as well, is riding all over this Tour de France this afternoon. It looks like Tony Martin coming across.
15 kilometers to go. Philippe Gilbert looks at the damage. This is his move, because once over the top of this climb, we are going to fly downhill into Carmo. Voigtler, again, the leader of the Tour de France, looks over his shoulder, says, wow, we've got a gap, and he's willing to work with them now. Yes, that looks very much like the style of Tony Martin, HTC, high road, coming across. Voigtler, the yellow jersey, first over the top of the last climb.
And don't forget, he's second in the points competition for the King of the Mountains, so he gets another little point there, might be quite valuable. I don't think he's going to work with this group to consolidate on their advantage, because there's a big main field starting to come back, but he does need to stay in contact with Philippe Gilbert, because Gilbert really is going today.
Well, the split is there, and Tony Martin has come across that gap. These are strong men who's got it up here now. Now it's basically downhill. It'll be a twisty descent guaranteed. The flick of the right arm there to say to Tony Gallopin, come on, get through, do some work. Remember, France hasn't won a stage of the Tour de France yet. We've got 2 of them in here now for France, as we get 5 riders. But this is incredible, Paul. The maillot jaune, the maillot vert, the green jersey, the yellow jersey, going clear of the field, 14 kilometers to go. The ever-changing face of the Tour de France.
No, it's brilliant to see Philippe Gilbert attacking like that, but of course, yellow jersey on the shoulders of Thomas Vogler. He's always been an aggressive rider. He actually said, Phil, in the newspapers this morning, I'm not going to attack when I'm in the yellow jersey. Well, I suppose he didn't attack there, but he was in the right place, and he saw the move going off the front, and he said, right, I'll have a bit of that action.
Absolutely, that wasn't an attack. That was just going with common sense, with the move that looks good. They've got 10 seconds now. David is the other rider in that group from the Quick Step team. Now, let's see what happens. There's Fabien Cancellara, I've just seen, Stuart O'Grady, they're now behind the race, their job done for the day. We think Mark Cavendish must be trapped back there as well, but you never know. He's a bit like Robin McEwen when it comes to hiding before the sprint. So we'll see as we continue now in the last 8 kilometers of the day. This is the town of Almeyrac, and the gap is opening, and this is an incredible situation. Gilbert and Voigtler, Tony Martin, these are very, very strong men. Davidens is the rider from Quick Step, and the other rider in there is Tony Gallopin.
Well, Tony Martin starts today in 6th place overall, and that's a little bit of a move that might threaten Cadel Evans, so I wouldn't be surprised, and I am not surprised to see BMC Racing coming to the front. They've now got to whip up the pacemaking.
As we go under 10 kilometers to go with the peloton now, we are looking at just 14 seconds spread on the field in the Tour de France. It is Garmin Cervelo who's got control of the front now.
15 seconds was the official time gap at 10 kilometers to go now. Garmin Cervelo have come to the front end of the pointy part of the main field, and that must mean that their big sprinter Tyler Farrar is in there. Definitely Thor Hushovd, the world champion, is present, and I've also seen Mark Cavendish. So what they have to do is organize themselves very quickly now to try and pull this back, this 5-man breakaway. But there's so much firepower in this breakaway, and they could be dragging Tony Gallopin in the red and white jersey of Cavendish here, Phil, to a French victory.
More speed required, says Thomas Voigtler. Tony Martin says, well, you come in front of me then. He says, no thanks, I'm going behind you. The Union flag of Great Britain indicating there that the headwind now might be having its effect. They're all dodging on the back wheel of Gilbert, but nobody seems able to go and give the Belgian a hand.
Well, he is so powerful. He was the one who literally split the race into pieces. Thomas Vogler, I think, just wants to go to the back and have a break for a short while. In the main field behind Phil at just 15 seconds distance, Mark Cavendish is in the group, as is Thor Hushovd, and some of the other big sprinters. 2 sprinters who've missed out are the Russian rider Denis Galimzianov and, of course, Alessandro Pataki, not able to get himself over the climb today.
We are continuing downhill almost into the town centre of Carmel at the moment. There are the 5 leaders, and amazingly the two major leaders of the Tour de France today are in that group attacking for the finish. Philippe Gilbert in green for points, Thomas Voigtler in yellow for the race lead, and Jens Voigt is trying desperately now to bring the rest of the race into contact.
Well, a little move here by David Ince as he tries to split up the group. He probably realised it's starting to come back now, Phil. We're looking at 7 seconds. There's the main field. These are very desperate moments. Ooh, and poor old Philippe Gilbert, he's probably got an awful lot of lactic acid in those thighs.
Well, it's a shame. It's another Belgian rider racing away there. Dries Stevenins there, trying desperately to get away. Somebody has been dropped from the front of the group. And they're saying now it's just about 8 seconds the gap now. Dries Stevenins, Tony Martin, now goes a move by Euskadi on the right. They haven't got a real sprinter, but they've certainly got some opportunities to try and go. It looks to me like Izagirre who's made a move here.
Well, this little move that he's going to get just going off the front, Phil, will give him about 2 meters 50 over the front end of the peloton, because still Team Sky are very happy to help with the pacemaking. There's a big long line of riders. I think the impetus now going out of the break, a little bit like the move Philippe Gilbert made, Phil, at the World Championships in Geelong, too far from the finish, and then he ran out of steam.
Well, we're hearing from Race Radio that Mark Renshaw has been dropped from the group now, so Cavendish is here, but his pilot Fish, as Paul called him, has been dropped from the group, so they'll have to rethink that one. They'll look for Matthew Goss perhaps. Philippe Gilbert gritting his teeth here. He heard the time check had just gone up a shade to 10 seconds, and he's gone again.
Well, you know, this man is having an incredible season, and he's having an incredible Tour de France. He has literally ridden the other riders in the breakaway right off his wheel. Tony Martin is going back to the main peloton, and I think that will be a big advantage for Mark Cavendish, because Tony Martin is a powerful man, a powerful part of the lead out for HTC High Road. The peloton still haven't got themselves back to Philippe Gilbert. If he wins this one, this is going to be an incredible victory.
Well, this looks as though Izagirre has got fresh legs there. He's trying to get up to Philippe Gilbert because he's the only survivor right now. But this man's done credit to that green jersey as race leader. He's been in our camera lens every day. Everybody must be fully committed there now, because they are under such pressure from these riders who refuse to give up today on the run into the finish. We're looking for the 6 kilometres to go marker now. We won't see that. They start at 5. But that's what Philippe Gilbert wants now.
Well, he's getting down into a tuck position, almost an individual time trial. This is still Tony Galopin just off the front of the peloton with, it looks to me as if that's in fact Pablo Urtasun from Team Euskaltel-Euskadi, and still the organisation starting to appear on the peloton. They must be wondering, Phil, what can we do to pull back Philippe Gilbert?
Well, he's got himself into his time trial mode now. He's looking lazily onto the handlebars, as streamlined as he can. His memory bank is just pushing those legs around like pistons, and he is trying to go clear. At the moment, he's still got, well, we say 10 on the television. The race organisation are saying it's 12. 2 seconds either way. That might be all that will be in it by the finish today. They are still on this long descent here. They're absolutely flying into Carmel. If all this lot come into the finish together, well, the last kilometre will not be for the nervous. I can tell you, 2 extremely sharp bends, and they're going to hit it at very high speed.
Well, he's got himself still 12 seconds advantage over the peloton, and it's a bit of panic on board, I think, in the peloton this afternoon, because they're running up the white flag to try and see whether or not there's going to be any assistance coming from any of the other teams. You can see when a rider swings across like that, that's an indication that, ouch, my legs are hurting just that little bit. You've got Omega Pharma Lotto at the front. They're trying to close everything down. Well,
Philippe has just hit the one little uphill there before we continue our way down to the bottom, and that is where the peloton have used it. There is Mark Cavendish, 4th man in white to the right. Rocas is just behind Cavendish as well. So HTC High Road are now getting control of the race, as again we now see an attack from Perez. Alain Perez has launched an attack. Now he's an opportunist, is Alain. He's tried this before. It hasn't worked before, and they've just lifted the tempo in the peloton to hold him.
Well, another slight move coming here from Vacan Soleil, but just look at the organisation of HTC High Road. They're not panicking. They don't want to respond to any of these attacks. They want to keep a steady tempo, because if you accelerate, that really is bad for the sprinters. That's the American rider TJ Van Garderen setting the tempo on the front of the pack, but lined up behind him are all of the HTC High Road lead-out squad.
Well, the one man missing from HTC High Road, surprisingly, is Matty Goss. He's just been dropped by this group and he's now behind the race. So I'm a bit surprised at that, but he's not having a good day after that rest. The others are all here and working for Cavendish. Again, Mark Cavendish has surprised us. On a hilly day, this pure sprinter has survived to looking likely now to fighting out the finish.
Well, very often, Phil, people say Cavendish can't climb, but bear in mind, you don't win Milan-San Remo if you can't climb, because there's a climb at 4 kilometres to go to the finish, and that's called the Poggio, and he got himself over that, as did Matty Goss this year, to his success.
And that is the over 300 kilometres, 180 plus miles, straight down from Milan to San Remo. Now, no help coming here.
When you come down...
The race radio, if you could hear it now, is shouting at everybody because they're getting in the way and they're very concerned about this last kilometre. The motorcycles have been told to get away from the race completely. We can't see any in our picture as they line up with 1 kilometre to go. And this is where you've got to hold on to your hats here. There are 2 very sharp bends, but it looks as though at least Team HTC High Road have got good control of the front of the race.
Well, Tony Martin swung off now, and in fact it's Omega Pharma Lotto are keeping the pace nice and high because their man Andre Greipel is up into 4th position, bumping and barging. That's Greipel right on the wheel of Mark Cavendish. The 2 former teammates, now big rivals.
Well, they've got through the S's here. There's still a sharp left-hander in the last 300 metres. Thor Hushovd, who's about 4th place on the right with those dark glasses on, has got himself into a great... This is the sharp turn here. As they come round the corner now, they've got a perfect lead up for the line. Now it is up to see if the sprint can come, and I don't see Mark Cavendish getting in on this one now. Watch out for Rojas. There he goes. He popped out of the shadows, and just look at the speed of this man. He sees the finish. Wait for it. He's being challenged by Greipel. He looks at Greipel, he grips again, and on the line, Greipel this time has got the better of Mark Cavendish, and that was a terrific sprint. The 2 arch rivals who are teammates have now gone 2-1 up in this year's Tour de France in the favour of Mark.
That was an incredible sprint by Andre Greipel, and how much has he enjoyed that? Look at the smile on his face. Yes, thank you very much. And more sweet because he's beaten to the line Mark Cavendish.
Absolutely. That will go down as a being very, very, very special for Andre Greipel. The presence of Mark Cavendish over the years has kept Greipel out of the Tour de France to such an extent Greipel had to change teams, and the result is he's pipped Mark Cavendish right on the line.
That was a very powerful sprint by Andre Greipel. He was in a slightly bigger gear than Mark Cavendish. Cavendish will be a bit surprised to get beaten. He doesn't like losing, but this is a good win by Andre Greipel because, you know, he had the power up there as well. There's Rojas, and looks like Rojas got himself 3rd place and Hushovd in 4th.
Yes, an incredibly good result in the green jersey competition there for Rojas and for Cavendish because he gets 2nd place points. But Greipel today has got himself another win, and this time it's for the Omega Pharma Lotto team. Well, I think we can show you the results straight away. Computer's working well. Greipel gets it over Cavendish, Rojas, Hushovd and Romain Felieux. The French sprinter who gets up there but just hasn't got quite that final kick just yet. Nonetheless, another 5th place for him. And Cavendish beaten fair and square this time around. Daniel Oss, the sprinter on Liquigas Cannondale, in 6th place. Geraint Thomas trying very hard for Sky, but in 9th for them. Samuel Dumoulin 10th further down. Looking at Gilbert, getting green points there, just creeping in. Gilbert in 14th place. So that's all he's worried about. A few more points in the bank for him in that green jersey competition. All right, we will take a break, of course. We'll then come back and we'll get some interviews as most as we can while we stay live, as well as look at the overall standings and the podiums. A great win by Andre Greipel today. When it came down to the dash to the line, normally when the missile has been fired 200 metres out, nothing can rush at him. But Andre Greipel, the man we call the gorilla, did, and he beat him on the line. And I'm not surprised he was overjoyed, because this was a very, very special day for him. First Tour de France stage win, and you've beaten the man who is a personal rival of Mark Cavendish, who last year were teammates, and no love lost between those two, because Greipel's always wanted to ride the Tour de France but was never selected because he was on the same team as Mark Cavendish. So he changed teams, and there's the result. Rojas in third though, which is keeping his challenge up for the green jersey. So this is what happened just after the finishing line. Hugs and kisses all round. Omega Pharma Lotto, without their alleged team leader for the race, still riding well. This is how the Michelob Ultra overall standings are tonight. Vauclair keeps his lead overall, no change. Sanchez at 149, Evans in third. Frank and Andy Schleck, they are the big menacing positions there, fourth and fifth. Tony Martin rode extremely well, yet still sits in sixth place today. Andreas Klode still the best of Team Radio Shack, but they're losing men fast. There's only 6 of them left. Philippe Gilbert is in 9th place, and Poulsang of Team Leopard Trek completing top 10. Basso says he's riding great, can't wait for the mountains, and he's in a good position in 11th place. So too Damiano Cunego, the Italian, who also climbs well. Nicholas Roach, the Irishman, sitting 13th and happy enough with that. Robert Kessing, despite his ups and downs, holding on to 15th place, 4 minutes and 1 second. And Contador, who once was 78th, is now up to 16th. But the gap is still a little bit large. He's got some work to do, 4 minutes 7. But remember, that is to the race leader, who he won't count in the mountains. And Tom Danielson remains the top American rider in 17th position overall in his first Tour de France. This is Philippe Gilbert. The man on the left was Jean-Francois Pecheur, who was a teammate of Paul Sherwin's, by the way, in his racing day. And now he's part of the direction of the Tour de France. So here we go. We're all ready now. Well, there he comes. He's going to take this in and be so delighted for Andre Greipel. It's his 6th win of the year, but it's the first time he's beaten Cavendish head-to-head.
And that will be a matter of pride for him, and Cavendish will be sent smarting back to his hotel here this afternoon. Cavendish had a good lead out from the rider from Liquigas Cannondale, but this man had it in the right gear and judged his sprint to perfection. With that lunge to the line, nobody was going to take that away from him.
Not at all. Andre Greipel, the first time they came head-to-head was in the Santos Tour Down Under in January in Australia, and that turned out to be a non-event as far as the sprinters went. Greipel himself a past winner of that race in Australia. He's changed teams this year purely to get a ride in the Tour de France, because he was never going to make it riding on Cavendish's team. And the result is he's got a stage win. ZTC, so we're here, we certainly are. This is the Michelob Ultra major contenders standings. Cadel Evans is third, base all these others off that time of 2:26. Schleck, you see, is only 3 seconds behind. Andy Schleck is there as well. Andreas Klode is in a good position. Ivan Basso, nicely poised as well. Former podium finisher in the Tour de France. So watch out for those guys, because they're going to start pushing home their advantages when we go up into the mountains, which are, by the way, on Thursday. That's when those last there on Thursday. He should be okay tomorrow. Thomas Voigtler, all smiles, very, very popular, gets his 2nd maillot jaune of the day, of the Tour de France. He's got 10 from the previous tour in 04. Now he owns 12 of them. And there's his 12th line as well. Well, you know the old song, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. Well, on the Tour de France, it seems to fall every day. This is the scene at the finishing town of Lavaux today, and it's raining again. For the moment, it's dry, though. The riders facing up to strong crosswinds. Let's have a look how it all started out on the ride of 167 kilometres today, just over 100 miles. In the green jersey, Philippe Gilbert, our hero of the Tour. Johnny Hugelen, with all of those stitches in his body in the polka dot jersey, as leader of the King of the Mountains. As always, Christian Prudhomme, the director of the Tour de France, pulling in the flag. And as always, Paul, a series of attacks, although the breakaway didn't get clear till 13 kilometres.
It seems to be the order of the day. The breakaway has been ordered by the team managers, and nearly every time we see a breakaway, it's got an FDJ rider in it. Andre Grifko was one of the riders most prolific in trying to break it away, and he's the Astana rider. And very soon, they built up a very serious advantage.
First climb of the day, the Côte de Tonac, came after 28 kilometres, about 17 miles today. Nobody in any hurry here, because it didn't really matter. It was Lars Boom in his 3rd Tour de France who went over the top in 1st place.
Well, the peloton had lost at this point a good 2.5 minutes, and it was starting to even go away. But there was no surprise at all, I think, Phil, on anybody's mind when they saw HTC High Road coming to the front to set the pacemaking. And no surprise at all, of course, to see most of that work being done by Lars Bak.
All right, well, let's have a look at what the weather has in store today. Not a very hot day, 64 degrees at 12 degrees, but the wind is actually quite strong and across the race. Rain is forecast, and we're in and out of the rain today. And as always, these beautiful Technicolor pictures are available in high definition as we make our traditional tour of the French chateau. I think this is the castle of Bruniquel that we're seeing there. Now the peloton on narrow roads again today. They do a big swoop around at this area of France in the department of the Tarn and the Tarn-et-Garonne. And we've just done the third category hill. Lars Bohm was the winner there. We're heading to the sprint. We will see that. And the final little climb at the end, just a fourth category hill. It's a good day for the sprinters, but they've got to be aware of these strong winds and the heavy rain squalls when they do come.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the riders, the intermediate time sprint hill is going to be extremely important. Looking just there at the Chateau de Bruniquel, and that chateau is in the heart of the region we are here. It is the home of the legendary Queen Bruno.
177 riders survive. There are 8 teams intact at the moment of the 22 that started, and well, I'm surprised there are so few, but you know the story of the broken bones. We've lost those 20 riders, and the majority are back at home or in hospital recovering from what has been the Tour de France of the crashes so far. It should be the day for the sprinters. You never can tell, especially if these crosswinds do take effect. There are 6 riders clear, have been since the 13th kilometre today. Perez, Bohm, Grifko, Delage, Valentin and Engoulevent. Well, they're huddled together to keep warm today because they're really getting fed up of getting changed early morning and coming out to play in the wet weather. Hopefully, and usually we're talking about storms in the high mountains at this stage of the Tour de France. At the moment, the actual high mountains have been enjoying warm sunshine, so let's hope it stays down there for us when we get there tomorrow. Down this beautiful avenue of plane trees here, this is the area where they grow them right down the edges of the road, providing shade for everybody. When we have sun, that is. When
we have sun, yes. These riders, when they cross that intermediate sprint point, will earn themselves 20 points. On the flat stages, there are 45 points available at the finish of every stage. And for the main field, because there are 6 riders clear, they will be sprinting for 9 points. Now, Mark Cavendish will continue to go for these because I think he's quite concerned about Philippe Gilbert, who is, in fact, a fairly good climber. And Philippe Gilbert can get himself some points on the mountain stages.
He's just keeping points in the bank, Cavendish. He wants stage wins. He makes no bones about it. That's what he wants primarily. If the green jersey comes as a result, he'll take it. But you can't be the best sprinter in a Tour de France without 1 year saying you've won the green jersey. It's their jersey. It's the same as the yellow jersey to the people like Contador, Cadel Evans or the Schlecks. 83 kilometres, 3:25. They may well sprint for this because there is a first prize of €1,500 as well for the first man over the line. Not to be sniffed at, so for that reason alone, these boys might well go for it.
If I might say, watch out for the Dutchman, number 43, Lars Boom. He's probably the most prolific winner so far this year with 2 stage victories, one in the Dauphiné and one in the Tour of Qatar.
We're just arriving at the sprint point here, and Michael Delage looks at them. Is nobody going to go for the €1,500? Well, I will. Michael Delage has gone. They've no interest in the green jersey, but he's taken out the prize, deservedly so. I think they just congratulate him because, Paul, he has now been in breakaways totaling 450 kilometres in this year's Tour de France, so he deserves that.
He certainly does. That's €1,500 in the bank. Well, I'll tell you one thing, Phil, it will be a slightly different approach to the line when we see the main field coming, because they will be sprinting for, yes, only 7th position, but as far as Mark Cavendish is concerned and Philippe Gilbert, it's important to keep trying to get points. Philippe Gilbert concerned about Jose Joaquim Rojas, and of course Mark Cavendish concerned about getting himself points and getting himself closer to the green jersey.
Well, it's about 3 more minutes before we see the battle for the places, but these are the protagonists for that green jersey, so bet your life that Philippe Gilbert will be up for it in the green jersey. He's a man that can do most things, better than most, including sprinting as well. Tried to win the stage yesterday, springboarding away in the last climb, getting wiped out and having to move way for his teammate Andre Greipel to take it out in the end. But that was a good tactic and it worked. Now, Delage, Engoulevent and Bohm have won the major part of the points, and I can't say they sprinted for them, but I'll guarantee these boys will sprint. It's giving this new rule in the green jersey competition where they have this 1 major point at every stage of the race, where there are much more points than normal. giving the commentators a chance to a dress rehearsal of calling the finish as well.
Well, I have to admit, I think I like the new rule change, and it makes it much more exciting, the sprint halfway through the course, because there are a lot of points available, making an extremely important sprint. And as you can see, HTC High Road are taking this very seriously. They've got the big lead-out train organised, and third position there is Bernie Eisel. Just behind him is Mark Renshaw and then Mark Cavendish. But queuing up for Mark Cavendish's wheel there, you can see the riders in the dark blue jersey, and those are the Movistar riders of Rojas.
Well, here we go. This is Amiga Pharma Lotto, the green jersey, and all the big boys are helping out here now. They've only got 6 riders left on this team. Greipel, who won yesterday, is going to lead out Philippe Gilbert here for the maximum points. He sits just 1 wheel in front of him, but watch the move now, because Cavendish is being brought up on the left of the picture.
Now it's Bernie Eisel, then it'll be Matty Goss, then Mark Renshaw. They know how to do this. In fact, they've got to the front, and in fact, you can just see there that Philippe Gilbert is getting squeezed out at the back end of that line. Now the big acceleration. Well,
it's foregone conclusion. Why doesn't Mark wait for the rest? He's just checking them out. He's not bothering to really open up the afterburners here. Greipel's coming after him, but it's a formality this, and a good deal of play. Better kick again, Mark. As he swung out here, sorry, now he comes out of the slipstream, and it's a one-on-one again. Greipel and Cavendish. This time it is Cavendish who wins, and Greipel was wondering where Philippe Gilbert was. He was leading out the green jersey, and the Cavendish has got maximum points there.
Well, I'll tell you what's happening there, Phil. Instead of separating out the lead in the King of the Sprints competition, it's actually bringing all 3 of those riders together. Cavendish getting himself a good maximum points. Rojas finishing in front of Philippe Gilbert, so that'll start to bring the race together. That's Rojas just on the inside lunging the line, and his teammate there getting across in the next position, but looking over his shoulder, Greipel saying, well, Philippe, where were you, mate?
Yes, and Gilbert got a bit mixed up in the big sprinters there, and notably Tyler Farrell wasn't contesting that, the American sprinter, so he's clearly thinking only of stage wins. He's always said all along from day one they had no real interest in the green jersey, just that we didn't believe him, but it looks as though that is the case now. So Cavendish is inching closer, but there were points also there for Philippe Gilbert. So as the sprint reenacted here, that was an easy win in the end for Mark Cavendish, and 4 places back of him was Gilbert, so he scores 4 points less than Cavendish in that competition. That competition is going to be a long time before we have a clear leader, but for the moment it's Gilbert who continues to ride onward in the leader's green jersey. We'll take a break. Now then, just looking at the dark sky up there, no signs of the blue sky at all. I hope that rain doesn't decide to dump itself over us today. Now, join the Aquaphor Latour Challenge, which is powered by Map My Ride and these long straight roads in this region where we're racing into Lavore are not conducive to a break, of course, when it comes back into range of the peloton on these long straight roads. Simon Gerrans has just swung off the front, a good workhorse for Team Sky. Sky have volunteered a man to help with the chase because they're going to go for the finish then. That's plainly obvious now, but basically it's the team of Mark Cavendish, High Road, who are doing it all here because they know they have the fastest sprinter, providing they get it absolutely right and Greipel doesn't spoil the show.
But these men, they will continue to ride up until the moment that they get caught by the peloton, because they will always bank on the possibility of a mistake. Anything can happen in this race. We've seen so many incidences in the race so far over the 11 days that we've had of the Tour de France so far. There could be an accident in the main field, there could be a mass pile-up, and that's why those guys will continue riding as hard as they can until they finally get caught.
Well, rather slick those roads down there, and the riders very precariously getting around the inside of that roundabout, which is the wrong way to a European, to turn left at a roundabout, and they took it with care. The peloton here now getting onto narrow roads as we're heading up towards this climb of the Puy-Laurent. It comes at 135 kilometers in, which is approximately 32 to go to the finish. So we're still 4 kilometers from the top, but we're more or less on the climb here. We're looking for the board now. It's quite a long climb.
Yep, just around about 4 kilometers long, but it's an average gradient of 4%, so nothing really too much to write home about, especially when you have a quick look, Phil, at the race route for tomorrow. It's a completely different kettle of fish.
But the route is now turning to the right, slowly but surely, and we're turning out of that tailwind into a crosswind. and that is going to make it really hard now all of the way to the finish. It's a general direction now up to the finishing line.
Once we've crested the top of this climb, the Côte de Puy-Laurent, that's when we'll start to head up towards Lavaur. Again, it's a fairly small road. It's a departmental road, a D road as they call them in France. Narrow like this, great for racing. The time gap slowly but surely coming down to a minute and a half. They're now starting to get to the point where they're shaving around about a minute off for every 10 kilometers covered.
Minute 35 they're now saying from the race itself. We're showing 1:36. It doesn't really matter 1 second, does it? These 6 boys, we'll see if there's anybody weak in this breakaway now. They've got to go through very, very quick now, because with the crosswind it's going to feel a little bit steeper than it really is. And after all, we're only 35 kilometers from the finish as we return now back across the Tarn River here as we're going in and out. Is this the Agout, this one?
Well, this is actually a tributary of the Tarn. It's called the Agout River, and it's also a sub-tributary of the Garonne. It's 194 kilometers long, and the source of this river is at altitude 1,100 meters, not too far away from Agout in the Languedoc.
Yes, there'll be beautiful rivers here all over France. Wild and wonderful. And as they continue here, the tempo has clearly increased here in the peloton. I'd like to see the back here as we get 2 or 3 kilometers into this climb, because I think you'll find we are stretching this whole peloton out now. Now, this is a difficult moment for the sprinters. They've got to position themselves well, and they've got to suffer and hang on in there until the roads get a bit flatter. This is not what they enjoy, and already now we are dropping riders here, as this is Vladimir Ishayshev who is going off the back.
Yeah, one of the riders from Team Katusha, a team which is the Russian cycling team, if you like. And this year, despite the fact they've got a lot of international riders, they made it a point of pride to bring a team to the Tour de France which is completely made up of Russian riders. It's led by Dmitry Konishev, and if my memory served me correctly, he was the first Russian ever to win a stage of the Tour de France in Pau.
He was the first Russian ever to pull on the King of the Mountains jersey as well, Dmitry Konishev, and he was the first Russian to win a professional medal in the Professional Road Race Championship when Greg LeMond and Sean Kelly was in the sprint. Kelly was third, Konishev was second.
And that was in Chambéry.
It was. Now, these are the riders now who just want to be in Lavaur at the moment, if possible, before the rest come in. But it's looking a bit grim. They've lost 15 seconds on this climb already.
Yep, it's a nasty little climb, especially when you've been in the break here since the 13th kilometer. What happens in a breakaway like this is that all of the riders will try and share the pace making together. They will all do a turn on the front. You can see Grivko doing a very long turn here, keeping the pace nice and high, followed by Jimmy Engoulevent. Just tacked on the back there is Ruben Perez. 29 years of age. He's actually the oldest rider in the breakaway and probably one of the more experienced. Now, maybe there's a problem here for Movistar.
This is the winner up at Superbest, Costa.
Yep, stopped at the side of the road. You see how he waited for the team car to come up alongside him, pulls out the front wheel, opens up the quick release, throws the wheel to one side. Mechanics there, the team manager up alongside him, pushes him away. Pretty good change. I would put that at about 15 seconds.
Yep, there's a good change, and the cars are still there, so again in amongst it, he should be okay. He's having a very, very good Tour de France. In his second Tour de France, he was the rider who had a boxing match in the mountains with Carlos Paredo last year, and he was lucky not to be disqualified from the Tour with Carlos. They both were left in the Tour, but they were fined, and now he's had a great Tour this year, and he won at Superbest.
I suppose you could say he had a knockout start to his Tour de France participation.
Now it's a big day tomorrow, as we all know. It is a challenge. The first time that the real leaders, the men that want to win this Tour de France, have to come out tomorrow and go with the best climbers. Cadel Evans, Andy Frank Schleck, Alberto Contador. It is a real toughie tomorrow. It's the last time we see the peloton chasing a breakaway for a while. We start with a little mountain we don't know too much about, which is first category. That leads to the giant called the Tourmalet, and then it finishes on the giant Luzardi-Den climb. So it's a big day tomorrow in the Tour de France. Then we'll know who the strong men really are as we turn for Paris. They've just passed under 20 kilometers to go. They're still there with 1 minute and 15 seconds of their lead. They're looking a little bit ragged now. 133, Mikel Delage is trying the best he can now, but he's definitely a weak rider in that breakaway. The peloton are chasing in full cry, and they've got an unfavourable wind for the approach.
And the farmers once again doing a phenomenal job as they present themselves to the rest of France and of course to the rest of the world. De la ferme à la table, from the farm to the table, and this is from the farmers of the Tarn.
That's a very big table down there as the farm. Again, how many people have they used in a perfect circle to show those bike wheels off like that? It's the magic of the Tour de France, and past the sunflowers now for the leaders as they speed on wet roads here. But obviously it's been raining where they are. We haven't got any rain at the finish. Our roads are dry down at the finish in Lavaux, and the gap is holding at 1:15 because the wind has changed. These boys are committed 100% now. If they've got any strength, they've got to use it to push on. The peloton comes under 20 kilometers to go, or 12 miles from the finish. They appear to be going much quicker than the breakaway, but the time doesn't indicate that.
Well, it's still locked in at 1:15. At 24 kilometers to go, it was 1:15, and although we've got a lot of men doing pacemaking, it's not eating into that advantage. That's the American TJ Van Garderen. I have to mention he's an American because he's got a Dutch name. In fact, his origins are Dutch, and his first team in Europe was in fact the Dutch development squad Rabobank.
Well, HTC High Road took him on board. This is his first Tour de France. He's already had a taste of success with the wearing of the King of the Mountains polka dot jersey. He lost that back to Johnny Hugeland, who is in it today and will be tomorrow when we go into the real mountains of this year's Tour de France, with the Col de Tourmalet and the Col up to Luzardiden, which will be the finishing line tomorrow. Two mountain summit finishes in the next 2 days. Last chance for the sprinters today for a couple of days. They've got to bring back these breakaways.
They do, but if you look at the colours of the jerseys there's a lot of similar colours riding together. The orange jerseys are in about 15th, 20th position. That's Euskaltel-Euskadi. They've been looking after Sammy Sanchez. He's had a fairly quiet tour so far, Sammy Sanchez. He lies in 20th position. He's looking for 5 minutes on Thomas Vogler, but he's only looking for 2.5 minutes on Cadel Evans.
Well, they continue through the wet here. We are sitting in the dry, although it's getting very cloudy at the finish, and the flags are blowing across the route from what will be the left shoulder of the riders as they race up towards the finish. So they've got...
Just going to the back, this is Lars back. That's not a surprise, Phil. He's done an incredible job of work throughout the whole of this stage with Danny Pate.
Well, I think they've had to bring Matthew Goss up, the Tassie rider from Australia, because they're not bringing this break back like they thought. At 9 kilometers, they still got half a minute. It's now disrupting the movement of the peloton to position their sprinters. There they are. That's the relationship now. There's the troops behind the charging of the Light Brigade, and these 6 are not going to slow down. They've added a second. It's gone out to 31.
Well, they are all working well. There's not one person in this breakaway group, Phil, is holding anything back, trying to play the sly guy of doing the soft turns in the breakaway. They're all prepared to hammer because they think we may well just survive. We've only got around about 10 to 12 minutes of effort left after being in front of this bike race for more than 3 hours.
Well, the rain has gone to a very light drizzle now, and it should be all stopping very, very shortly, for the moment at least, as now everybody is throwing what they can into the chase here to try and pull up to the front. They're sprinters, and it's 8.2, 8.1, and it's still half a minute. They are applying all of the pressure they can, and those 6 boys up front are not giving up.
They are not giving up, and as I said, nobody's shirking the pacemaking. They're all prepared. They're working as an extremely good, cohesive group. As you just saw Ruben Perez look over his shoulder to try and judge how far away they were from the main field. I just spotted Julian Dean moving to the front, the Kiwi rider on Garmin Cervelo. Now he will be looking to lead out Tyler Farrow when we come down to the finishing line.
Well, in conditions like this, of course, these are feared moments by the leaders and projected favourites to win the Tour de France. They don't want to get involved now with a silly accident when they're only 7 kilometres from the finish. And I think that's why the rain has started on the course again. Look at this now. It's ironically, it's gone off for the finishing line. It's moved up the road and it's hit the rides. Look at the face on the right there. Fabian Cancellara trying to protect the Schleck brothers. Andy just behind him there. And this is Cadel Evans trying to keep out of trouble with his mouth wide open. Mark Cavendish is over to the left, tucked in behind his team. Renshaw's got his wheel.
Well, the race referee there with his red light flashing is right in front of the neutral service vehicle. A lot of riders are being dropped off the back because of this pace. There's two races going on here. You've got the races for the riders who want to win the stage, and then the races for the riders who don't want to lose any time. There's Alberto Contador in the yellow glasses and the yellow brakes on the right-hand side there. Julian Dean in the blue helmet behind him. I wouldn't be surprised to see the American Tyler Farrar right on the wheel of the Kiwi.
These are the leaders, still getting on with the job in hand, and agonizingly slowly the big pack is pulling them back. The clock is saying 15 seconds now, 5 kilometers to go to the finish. They're getting desperate in the peloton. The road's remaining quite narrow as we run down towards the finish in Lavaux.
9 seconds is the official gap between the 6-man leading group and the front end of the main field, and it's still under the control of Team Lamprey. Big move now coming from Lars Boom. This is a last desperate ditch effort.
4.5 kilometers. Mikel Delarge is really digging deep for the energy, and a little bit of an attack going there by Ruben Perez. No, it's by Bohm himself who's made the move. And Lars Bohm now, is he going to ride alone to the finish and fool the sprinters at their own game? This guy can do it. He's the time trial champion of Holland. He's also a terrific man against the watch.
Well, he's the one rider in that breakaway who could possibly create the surprise. He knows how to master this very explosive effort. He's learned that from cyclocross in the winter, because probably the most important kilometre in the cyclocross race, Phil, is the first kilometre. You've got to go out to the starting gate and get yourself into the first difficulties in the first positions. Lamprey now taking over some help. There's Bernie Eisel sitting in second position. Behind him it's Tony Martin. Behind him it's Mark Renshaw. The black and white jerseys on the right-hand side of HTC High Road are, of course, Team Leopard Trek. That's Fabian Cancellara locked on his wheel, as if it's a limpet mine locked onto a submarine, is Andy Schleck.
For inside 4 kilometers to go for Lars Bohm now, as he ties the time trial away from the field, which will take some doing. He's going to have to hit 50 kilometers an hour at least and hold it now as he runs down to the finish. This is everything or nothing for him. As he pushes on now, the peloton are slowly wrapping it all up behind him, as out of the mare comes about 160 cyclists racing in a long straight line towards Lavaux.
Well, Andre Grivko, he's back in the folder. Ruben Perez is resisting a fraction, only about 50 yards off the front end of this main field. And Lars Boom really has put in a solid effort. There you can see the remnants of the breakaway. It's now, they're going to get swept up. That will leave just one man off the front of the peloton here this afternoon. And one man who could create the massive surprise and outwit the sprinters, Lars Boom.
3 kilometers to go as they pass under the banner. Everybody is back except one man. So the breakaway went 13 kilometers in. Most have been caught at 3 to go. Lars Bohm is still disrupting the thought of the sprinters here, as the workhorses from their teams are still having to try to reel this man in.
His legs are burning now with the lactic acid that's starting to build up in them. As you can see, the concentration on the faces of these riders. Fabian Cancellara is not thinking about sprint victories this afternoon. All he wants is to make sure that Andy Schleck is comfortably and safely taken to the finishing line. It's Bernie Eisel doing a man against man, trying to pull himself back to the wheel of the Dutchman Lars Boom.
Just notice Mark Renshaw there sitting in front of Mark Cavendish, just keeping him safe and sound on the left of our picture. And that's it now. We all come together at just over 2 kilometers from the finish. The sprinters have it now as they line up for the finish. And High Road have still got a few riders here, but only 3 of them. The middle man is Mark Renshaw. Tony Martin leads, and Cavendish is checking out who's around him. Well, I can tell him that Rocas is getting rather close to him and looking for the perfect lead out.
David Miller now comes to the front in the blue helmet. Behind him it's Thor Hushoff. That obviously means that the sprinter for Team Garmin-Cervelo this afternoon is going to be Tyler Farrar, the American. He should be in 3rd position there. It's still a very long way to go to the line.
Another demonstration of how to ride a great time trial by the Scot here, David Miller. He really is superb at this sort of a run. They're looking now 1.5 kilometers to go. Farrar is the man on the far right, battling to get into the line.
Julian Dean trying to get himself in front of his team leader here. Julian Dean, the pilot fish there, floating in the wind is the 1 kilometer flag. The main field is under the control of our Garmin-Cervelo. David Miller will do a long turn. He will try and leave the last lead out to Thor Hushoff, who's there in his World World Championship jersey, and now getting himself into that line is Julian Dean, the Kiwi. Zigging and zagging on
dodgy riding going on the right there with the elbow going out, as we see now Sky coming through in the middle here. Sky are going to get mixed up with this one today as they now get under that 1 kilometre to go. Are they getting control of the peloton for the British squad?
Well, Team Sky now riding alongside the team of Garmin Cervelo. It's Julian Dean who's on the front of making a massive big turn here, slipping back into about 4th position is Thor Hushovd.
Now, as they line up for the finish now, Greipel is also in the mix here again. He's going to look for Mark Cavendish. Tyler Farrar has got himself too early on the front on the right now as they open up the sprint on the left here. Cavendish is 3rd in line. Renshaw is waiting to lead Cavendish. That's off the final bend. Now Renshaw goes. He's got the Max missile locked into his back wheel. Tyler Farrar has got onto the wheel of Cavendish, and Farrar has got onto the wheel of Cavendish, but Cavendish doesn't care. Here he comes, Mark Cavendish and Andre Greipel as they go head-to-head. Cavendish, oh boy, revenge is very, very sweet as Cavendish wins. Greipel gets 2nd and Farrar gets 3rd. Well, it just took 24 hours to get your own back.
Well, that was a perfect lead out once again by Mark Renshaw of Australia to put Mark Cavendish in the right position to just accelerate and catapult himself to the finishing line. There's the yellow jersey of Thomas Vogelfeld, so there'll be no more change in the overall standings. Cavendish, Greipel, right up there as well, Tyler Farrar.
Well, a tremendous result of pure sprinters, and see, Mark Cavendish missed his man yesterday in Mark Renshaw, who was dropped on the final climb and couldn't take him to the line. But it's all back to status quo now as Mark Renshaw delivered the missile to a perfect liftoff, and he's just pipped Andre Greipel in the sprint.
Well, that was a lead out by Geraint Thomas, the Welshman there, and this is the hustle and bustle for the wheel of Mark Cavendish. Look how Renshaw there keeps himself in his line, and he allows the gate to be open for Cavendish to come up the inside. This time he wasn't going too slowly. Little quick look there to see what the position of Andre Greipel was. Well, Andre, you can have my slipstream here this afternoon. Greipel gets out of the saddle, but he just doesn't quite have the jump that he had yesterday. So that is win number 18 as they re-look at the replay, Phil.
Yes, it makes happy reading. That's Renshaw on the right, the best lead-out man in the business, and the best sprinter in the business is Mark Cavendish. He's now won 18 stages of the Tour de France. The record for the sprinters stands at 22, Andre Darrigard of France. That'll be the first target for Mark, and then after that, he might start looking for Eddie Merckx, who's got the most stage wins of all. What an incredible sprint finish it was in terrible conditions, but Cavendish didn't care. There's the results for us. Mark Cavendish ahead of Andre Greipel and Tyler Farrar. I do remember in our pre-race show we all chose a man there. Denis Galimzhinov in 4th place, the Russian sprinter. Edvald Boysenhagen was the man they were trying to get over for Sky today rather than Ben Swift, and Edvald got 5th. Bellieu still knocking on the door in 6th. Rochas in 7th. No sign of Philippe Gilbert. This will all well for Mark Cavendish tonight in the green jersey competition. And still no sign of Gilbert as we go down through the top 15. So it could be a new leader in that competition. If not, it's going to be extremely close tonight, Mark Cavendish and Gilbert. Scenes at the finish. You're doing good, he said. Thanks very much to the team as he goes this time to the podium, where we will see him very shortly. We'll take our usual break. Don't forget, you can catch up on NBCSports.com/cycling. Just about everything we do here. But come back soon and we'll see Cavendish receive the winner's prize. There he is on the podium now, enjoying every moment, putting matters to rights as far as he feels. You probably saw the Isle of Man flag there, which is where he lives. It's 3 legs on a red flag. That is the Isle of Man. It's probably why he wins all the time. He's got 3 legs, you see. He comes from that small island about 80 miles off the coast of England in the North Sea. And Cavendish has gone around looking at all the dignitaries. We'll show the Michelob Ultra overall standings. They stay exactly the same as they were amongst the leaders this morning because everybody timed in together. So now we go into the mountains with these time gaps here. Watch out for movement coming. Gilbert is in 9th place. Fulsang is in 10th. Where's the big boys though? What happened to our old friend Alberto Contador? Now let's have a look at the green jersey, and Mark Cavendish, the sprinter, has now got it, as he says, without really trying for it, but I don't know about that. Anyway, tomorrow he rides in green into the Pyrenees. Jose Rojas 2:35, Gilbert goes to third, only 20 points behind Cavendish, and Gilbert might score in the mountains. Ferrier is in 6th place, Cadel Evans in 7th, he might score in the mountains too. Tyler Farah is in 8th place, top 10 completed by Galazimov, the Russian sprinter. Here we are. All smiles, the sprinters always. That's a man who told us he didn't want the jersey, so what do you think? As Mark Cavendish here pulls on at the Maillot Vert. And it's a target he's got to have at some stage. You can't be the best sprinter in the Tour de France without 1 year saying, yep, I won that. That goes well placed in 12th. Contador, let's have a look. These are the contenders now. Cadel Evans goes in best of the contenders, followed by Sheck 3 seconds behind him, and his brother Andy a little bit further, but nothing in it. Robert Hessing, is he injured or is he okay? We'll find out. Alberto Contador, how is his knee? We'll find out tomorrow. Tommy Danielson is the top American as he goes into the mountains, and he's in his first Tour de France. They're all after that jersey now, which is being put back on the shoulders of little Tommy Voeckler, and he'd be happy to carry it into the high mountains tomorrow. He'd be a tough man to unshift, as we saw years ago when he took on Lance Armstrong. He would not give it back until Lance really had to work at him, and finally got it back. It's taken 12 days and almost 1,200 miles to find the big mountains of this year's Tour de France, but there they are, and this is where we go today, the climb up to the top of Luz Ardiden. Let's have a look how the race is going so far today. A nervous day for everybody, but down in the start town of Cugnot, in the Maillot Jaune, the yellow jersey, is Thomas Voeckler.
In the polka dot jersey, Johnny Hoogeland, everyone wondering whether or not he'll be able to conserve that lead this afternoon. And on the left-hand side, in the green jersey, Mark Cavendish.
So the start given, as always, by the race director, Christian Prudhomme. And the riders in no hurry, I can't understand that, Paul, to get away from the start today as they begin to rendezvous now with the high mountains. But after a couple of kilometres, we did get 6 riders clear. And here they are now, and they're still away once we get to the live pictures. Geraint Thomas is the highest placed man in the breakaway. He's gained now 7 minutes, and so he is the virtual leader of the Tour. And it doesn't look as though Thomas Voeckler is too worried about it at this early stage of what is a long, long ride today. There's the man who leads the King of the Mountains, Johnny Hoogeland. We'll see how well he really can climb with all those stitches in today over these big mountains. Let's have a look at the weather today. Well, looking out of our comedy box, is rather nice. Temperature is fairly cool, 55 degrees, 8 miles per hour from the north. The wind, the forecast is partly cloudy, and at the moment that's exactly how it is at the finish. And as always, and we're going to see wonderful pictures today that are available in high definition.
Thomas Voeckler looking resplendent in his yellow jersey, and in fact, just going back through the records, Phil, the last Frenchman to wear the yellow jersey on the 14th of July was Thomas Voeckler.
That is absolutely amazing. It's Bastille Day here in France, and all the celebrations on the Champs-Élysées at the moment as we speak, with the French celebrations of Bastille Day, and the next time we'll close that road down will be for the end of the Tour de France, a week on Sunday.
It is nice to see Europcar doing the pacemaking here. Thomas Voeckler actually knows this first climb of the day, and although we've never been over this climb of the Orquette des Anquizans in the Tour de France, we have been over it in the Route du Sud. In fact, it was a mountain top finish, and the rider who won on that occasion was Thomas Voeckler.
Well, he's having a wonderful 3 days in yellow. He's now wore the yellow jersey 13 times in his career. He had it 10 times back in 2003. Look at this profile, Paul. A nice gentle start to the day. The sprinters should still be on hand for the points at that sprint competition at the Green S. And then we start climbing. A first category climb, followed by the all category Col du Tourmalet, followed by the finish at Luz Ardiden.
Yeah, when you start to see the information and the statistics about those climbs, Phil, you're looking at the climb of the Tourmalet at 17 kilometres. And that, as Geraint Thomas said earlier, Phil, is the easy side. The other side is 22 kilometres to the summit.
Yes, there's approximately 25 miles of climbing up those 3 mountains today, and that is a lot of climbing. So consequently, they're not too concerned by the fact that this group of 6 riders have 7 minutes lead over the field, because we still have 140 kilometres to go, about 87 miles still to race to the finish.
Yeah, Ruben Perez, number 25, getting himself into another breakaway. Euskaltel Euskadi will be extremely well supported today because, as you said, we're right in the high spots of the Pyrenees, and just over the other side of these mountains is Spain. And there are an awful lot of orange jerseys. The Basques have turned out in style today to support their riders.
Well, as you rejoin live pictures here, we're looking at Tommy Voeckler. He's been to his team car. Now, I did say earlier that he said he didn't want this breakaway to get more than 8 minutes. We're standing at around 7.5 just now, so I'm wondering if he's gone back to check on that. He's pedalling back up to the race now. No pressure at all at the moment. Enjoying his day in yellow. Will it be his last? So as our helicopters wander around the beautiful trees here in the area of the Pyrenees, we're going to head up towards I was just wondering if Tommy Voeckler was checking on the breakaway back in the park there. This looks like the Chateau of Mauvezin. It is the Chateau of Mauvezin.
Well spotted. It comes from the Gallo-Roman period, and it was on this site that it was built because it was strategically situated between the Bigorre and Comminges, two of the big areas in this part of France, and it was the separation between the kings of England and France and the Count of Comines. It was in fact transformed into a castle fortress in the 13th century.
Which was probably due to the fact that the kings of England rather fancied that for their summer holiday home, and so they had to make it a fort instead.
Well, Gaston Phébus was one-time owner of this, and he was in fact the self-proclaimed Prince of Berne. We are going right through the Berne in a couple of days' time, because the capital of Berne is actually Pau, where the race starts tomorrow.
Well, it looks in magnificent preservation, doesn't it, down there? And it was the property of King Henry IV. Then it became part of the Kingdom of France in 1607, in the 17th century. The peloton are going pretty close to that. We're still riding on flattish roads. We've still got the feeding station to come before any action today. And then we've got the sprint to come as well. Mark Cavendish has got his hands on that green jersey. If you're watching yesterday, you will have seen him kiss that jersey when he was presented with it, having told us all week it wasn't a target. It clearly was a target, and there he is, almost on cue. They must be hearing our commentary in the team cars down there today. But there is Mark, and what an incredible sprinter. He really did turn on the style yesterday.
He certainly didn't want to make any mistakes. He came out of that pack like a bullet, led to perfection, I have to say, by Mark Renshaw, who knew exactly what to do and put him in the right place at the right time, and in front of some really good sprinters too. Second Greipel, third the American Tyler Farrar. That really was a royal sprint at the end.
I think the best compliment you can get is from Mario Cipollini, the great sprinter, who said that Cavendish is 100% better than he ever was. So as the peloton travels along, let me remind you, make sure to sign up for our Travelers Fantasy Cycling Challenge at nbcsports.com/challenge. With Maillot Jaune on Bastille Day, a Frenchman rides in yellow, Thomas Voeckler, and funnily enough, the last time a Frenchman rode in yellow on Bastille Day, it was Thomas Voeckler as well, back in 2003. So at the moment, things going well for the French. Well, these boys visibly lifting up the tempo, and they're pegging it at 8.5 minutes. So I think Thomas Voeckler has got his way here with his discussions with the management in the team car at the back. He's now got them pegged. He won't chase them down. I think that'll come as an automatic reaction, Paul. First of all, we have got the sprint coming up.
Yeah, the sprint will come up, and that's coming at 92 kilometers to go to the finish. So we're about 14 kilometers away from there, 7 or 8 miles of racing, having left Lannemezan behind for the main field. Coming onto this big long stretch of the national road here, the national road which will take the main peloton into the feeding station. You're right, Phil, because there'll be a general acceleration once we get to the sprint point, because the sprinters will have to try and duke it out for just 7th place. But then there'll be an acceleration once we get to the first climb of the day, and that's just a natural progression that the main field adopts.
Yes, well, that's of more interest to the peloton and Mark Cavendish than to these 6 riders up front, because they haven't really scored too well in that green jersey competition. So looking here at number 25, Ruben Perez, Euskaltel Euskadi. He's ridden the most Tours de France, 25, it's his number, 5 he's ridden. Geraint Thomas is the virtual. When we saw a head-on shot there, I thought there was only 5 riders left here. We haven't had any information on anybody being dropped. So I would suspect that coming through the feed there, one of the riders has fallen to the back of the race, and I suspect it might have been Gutierrez who's gone into the team cars. This is not a game. I think we would all agree with that. This is a very, very hard bike race. This is the FDJ car, the team car. Jeremy Roy coming up, having a chat. They've had a man in the break every day of the race. Somebody's always been in, very often Roy himself. This is down, leaving Lannemezan now in La Barthe de Nest as the peloton cross yet another lovely town in the Hautes-Pyrénées, which is the High Pyrenees. So let me give you one more reminder about our sweepstakes. Don't forget to log on to nbcsports.com/poker to go for these boys. Money at stake. I don't think we'll see them go for it particularly, though, will we?
Well, I don't know. I've just been onto the bank, actually, Phil, and I got today's exchange rate through, where 1,500 euros just corresponds to 2,100 US dollars.
Thank you very much. How many pounds? About 1,200. 1,200, right. I'll take the pounds.
I'll take the dollars.
OK, then we've got a deal. Let's go for it. 8.53 is the gap at the moment. Geraint Thomas is setting the pace here for Wales, primarily, and for Sky in particular.
Well, I think one of these guys might get the money, Phil, because we're not out there to duke it out with them.
And the crowd here, you can hear them all the time, clapping and constantly applauding the riders as they go through. They recognise the effort a rider in the Tour de France has gone through now. This is day 12 of the Tour, and this is a long day in excess of 200 kilometres with 3 massive climbs. And the sting in the tail is just ahead now. We're going slightly uphill to this sprint, contour-wise. But just down the road is the first climb of the day.
Well, there's the sprint, and as we come up to the line, there was a little sprint there, and it's Laurent Mangel of Sources getting himself maximum points. $2,100 in the bank for him.
Or £1,200 or 1,500 euros for Laurent Mangel. So there we are, Mangel in his first Tour de France gets, I believe, his first prize after 12 days of cycling. Chasing him over the line there, the other Frenchman, Jeremy Roy. 1 kilometre to go, about 1.5 out now, and the pattern is getting a little bit urgent. 1 kilometre to go under the green flag. It's the green jerseys of Team Europcar, but the white jerseys of Cavendish's HTC High Road have got themselves really up near the sharp end now. Cavendish sitting there just at the bottom of our picture now.
Waiting game it is here this afternoon. Cavendish is there in the green jersey, a green helmet and matching green glasses. This is going to be maybe a last-minute burst there by Philippe Gilbert, because he's currently lying in 8th position.
Well, Gilbert's trying to get up on the black top jersey to the right here. Cavendish is moving up on the inside, sat on his teammate's wheel. They've got the line. The team of Rojas is also at the front. Now we're beginning a move also from Greipel's Boy of Omega. They're looking to try, and there's a little bit of a handsling there, which won't be allowed onto Philippe Gilbert. Cavendish has gone alongside him, and Cavendish has kept his team. 3 teammates leading him to the line here. They will all move out of the way once he gets there. Now there's 2. Mark Cavendish has got Rojas on his back wheel, but Rojas will never get over the top of the Manx missile, not when he starts the dance. As he comes away here, gets 9 points.
Did you see what the teammates did there, Phil? Very clever tactics. They kept going. There was Matty Goss was leading him out, followed by Mark Renshaw. They didn't set up. They continued to sprint to take the points away from everybody else. Great tactical moves.
Absolutely perfect, because they also made 2 more points bonus, if you like, for Cavendish, because Rojas and Gilbert didn't score the next 2 points either. They might have got one of them. No, I don't think he did.
A bit of a photo finish for Matty Goss there.
Good place to wave the British flag there, as Cavendish adds 9 more points to his tally in the green jersey competition.
Yeah, just to look at the lead out there. Oh, there's a little bit of a problem too, a technical problem there for Rojas. He in fact got himself 3rd place. Goss getting up there in 4th place pushes Gilbert a little bit further back in the points.
Yeah, Gilbert not at all happy with that. This is not his type of sprint, to be honest. The peloton all, they bought the seats at the back of the cinema, as you can see, and they're just watching that sprint because they know everybody will stop racing now. They will regroup. The current gap is 8.25 minutes to those 6 leaders. Okay, well, that's the matinee out of the way now as we begin our approach to the first climb of the day.
And rather interesting because a little move going straight over the top of that sprint point there. Johnny Hougaland, the leader of the King of the Mountains competition in that polka dot jersey, thought, right, this might be the moment for me to get clear. What he's looking for is to get a breakaway over the next 12 kilometres and start the climb, the first category climb, in a move and try and get himself some more points.
Well, he'll have to pick off at least one of those riders up front because there are 6 riders clear and there are only 6 riders get points on the first category climb under the new regulations. Very tight point scoring in the mountains this year, and they're all trying to explain what's going on. I'm not sure they're going to push on there, Paul.
Well, I think it's a bit of a difficult call there, Phil, to ride across an 8.5 minute gap, and there's a flat tire at the back. You can just see the back end of the machine moving left and right as
that was Di Gregorio.
Yeah, he's had a lot of bad luck in the Tour. The Movistar rider there explaining to Johnny Hougaland, sorry mate, I'm not going to ride across an 8.5 minute gap with you. Let's wait in the main field and we'll see what happens later on.
Let's have a look. Here we go. Looks like it might be good. Wheel is out, wheel is in. Let's just see what happens.
Well, this
We've
is
asked
the crucial
our producer to time this because he doesn't have a lot more to do at this time of the day, so he's going to tell us what the time is, and he comes back with 14 seconds. Very good.
Well, 14 seconds is actually a pretty good time change, but I thought that was rather slow, and he took some time actually adjusting the rear skewer, the quick release lever that locks the wheel back into place. Normally, the mechanic should have had that set up in the car, so you slot it in, pull the wheel back quickly, and just pull over the switch. You can get a wheel change at the back in less than 10 seconds. The front, between 7 and 10 seconds, is about normal.
That's the River Nest running on the left shoulder of the riders here. Beautiful little tributary as it charges down through the Pyrenees, and there's the confirmation of that sprint. Not sure we should tell the riders about that just now as we're heading up. Very often the Col d'Aspin, which is off on the right shoulder, the riders there will take them onto the Col de Tourmalet, but today we are going straight towards the Col de Tourmalet and heading up to that mountain via Le Hoquet d'Ancizan, which is the first time the Tour de France has ever climbed this hill, which is about to start.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's been scaled on a number of occasions in the Route du Sud, the precursor to the Tour de France and, of course, their French national championships. It is a fairly nasty climb at 1,500 meters in altitude, and like every one of the climbs, we are looking at some fairly steep climbs. The average gradient is 7.5% for a total distance of 10 kilometers, but it's actually steepest after the first 3 kilometers because it's a 10% gradient.
Right, we're on to the lower slope. We've had first category climbs of one, I think, over the last 12 days of racing. This is the first time that we're going to whole series. There is the polka dot boards which indicate the start of the climb, and there's the 9.9 kilometers we've told you about to the summit. And when they see that board towards the end of the day, it's going to say 13.3 because that's the length of the climb from Luz-Saint-Sauveur up to the finish of the day of racing.
Yep, just inside of 10 kilometers to go to the summit, and that is 6 miles of racing to the Hoquet d'Ancizan. And as I said, the Route du Sud has been over this before, so a lot of the French riders will know this climb. Thomas Voeckler will know it very well because he's won up here in a mountaintop finish. It's a narrow climb with a very twisty and technical descent on the other side.
Just take a look. All trying to get a good position to see the climb. Tommy Voeckler in the yellow jersey. He's won on this climb before, but it wasn't in the Tour de France. It was in another race known as the Route du Sud, the race from the south. And Anthony Charteau, the rider to the right in green there, he was the king of the mountains last year in the Tour de France, and I think that's the reason they changed the rules, because he got most of his points on flatter roads. And now they're making it a pure climbers trophy once again. They're really riding hard at this now. There is the sign, 9.9 kilometers to the top. It's officially begun. They could have made it a nice 10 kilometers, put the sign lower down, because they've been climbing for a little bit now already. Now, as we come back to the rear of the field, I don't see the champion of Switzerland's jersey, so Cancellara has moved quickly up through the bunch. This is a wide sweep off that corner. Nice little dodge of those straw bales, because they're so anxious to hold position here for the start of the climb. It's not a wide climb, this. Just looking here at the Katusha rider, this is Denis Galimzhinov. He is the sprinter on the team, and he's already had enough as he tails off the back. He's in his first Tour de France. 1,564 meters to the top. And this is now probably the steepest part of the climb here. It's at 9.4% just here. This is the French flag flying on Bastille Day. These are the leaders. 85 Gutierrez has got himself off the back and moved up a little bit, but all of the work since we started the climb has been done by the Welshman on the Sky team, Geraint Thomas. Change of direction now. This is when the climb gets a little bit harder for the peloton as well as they move off the road. Now they get onto the steep sections of this climb. The peloton reasonably compact, but at the back they're starting to get dropped a little bit now. Stopping on the left there was Navadauskas of Garmin Cervelo. He's been a workhorse, but he had a front wheel puncture. That's really unlucky as he pulls over to the left of the road. And the other rider in trouble here for Cofidis is Samuel Dumoulin, the sprinter on the Cofidis team, already falling off the pace. This is Johan Gen here, who's setting the pace on the front. He's actually a sprinter too, but it looks to me like he's a pretty good workman as we come up to these early stages of the climb. Johnny Hoogland trying to pop into our picture. There he is, centre in the polka dot jersey, turning out to be a real man for the mountains. Now, have we gone back? No, we're still with the main field. I hope we've gone up to the leaders. They're timed at 5:47 at the moment. Now look at this. Johnny Hoogland is trying to go, and it looks like Sylvain Chavanel is trying to join him on the attack. Well, this is an interesting move. Two strong men, not fancied as favourites to win the Tour de France. There may be no reaction from the field for this. Now, that's a good move by Johnny Hoogland. He's trying to get in the action for just a little bit longer in the King of the Mountains. He tried it earlier. It didn't work, so he's giving it another go now. Now, he's got to catch somebody in those 6 riders up front to get any points today on this climb. Only the first 6 get points in the competition on this first category climb, but it changes on the next climb that we will see. A higher point score, but he's got to get in amongst those 6 leading riders to get the value of the points. No, peloton is where we need to see where the favourites are positioning themselves. No problems for Tommy Voigtler at the moment. And oh, another little problem here though, because that's a bit of a wobble there from Martin Jalingi, who I think had a problem. And on the left of our picture there, Navadauskas has got back after that front wheel change. He's done well. Last man, but got back nonetheless. Now, the 2 leaders have got 20 seconds off the front, and they've got a little bit more help on the way here from Astana. And this is going to be Roman Kreuziger. Now, we haven't seen too much of Kreuziger. He hurt himself. I think you can see the bandage on his left wrist there. He hurt himself in a major crash, I think about day 4 or 5 of the Tour. And this is the first time we've seen him since, to be in all honesty, and he's a very, very good cyclist. But he lost too much time to stay as a likely high finisher in the Tour de France. But maybe he's going to distinguish himself today, because he could be a likely winner of the race today. So as Kreuziger continues now to try and catch up with those 2, if those 3 get together, it might change the day.
That's what he'll be looking for. The team has lost their leader as well, Alexander Vinokourov, at the start of the day. Phil Kreuziger was 130th, looking for 52 minutes. Yep. A man who finished 9th overall last year. Absolutely, and it's an unreal position for him, but it was all down to that fall and a very painful wrist. He thought he'd broken it, in fact. So you've got to take your hat off to Johnny Hoogland as he's trying now to join those leaders and fly the flag, because this is where the King of the Mountains competition really begins. There's 20 points for the first man over the Tourmalet. There's 20 points for the first man to the finish. There's 10 to the top of the climb we are on now. And Johnny knows he's got to score points today to keep that jersey, because if the breakaway stays away, then we could have a new leader in the King of the Mountains tonight. And that's in a little bit of bother here, Phil, because he's being dropped by Kreuziger. Oh, they've lifted the pace just too quickly for him. Well, this is a shame, because Johnny made the move, and now he's found the tempo a little bit too much for him, and he's having to dig really deep here. There's no point in destroying yourself to keep up with those riders with 2 major climbs, of which are much harder than this one to come. So it looks as though he's lifted himself up into the red zone, as it were. And he's trying desperately to hold them, but this might be a little bit of inexperience here. First Tour de France. You've got to conserve your energy with the mountains that lie ahead. Maybe the polka dot jersey just a little bit too of an inspiration.
Just checking where the riders are behind him. They're 4:17 behind the leaders, so they're continuing to bring back those 5 front runners. He will not give up, but I think he should and ride within himself and not try to keep up with these 2 guys. 2 big-name guys in Roman Kreuziger, former winner of the Tour of Switzerland, and in fact he finished 3rd in that the year he defended his championship. And Sylvain Chavanel, who was a yellow jersey on a couple of occasions in the opening week of the Tour last year, and hasn't had such a great season this year, except the fact he won the French national championship, and that's why he's on the attack. So leaders are in the last half kilometre. We'll get pictures of those shortly. This is the main pack. Voigtler has conquered the first mountain in the Pyrenees, safely at the front in that yellow jersey, but he's surrounded by big names there now, including and there's the as we go back to this is the attack for the prizes at the top. Well, that's caught Geraint Thomas off guard, Paul, as it looks to me as though it's Laurent Mangel who got the points. He packs a sprint too down at the green jersey points competition. First Tour de France for him, and he's gone straight off for the maximum points of 10.
Well, it's quite funny how things can turn around in the Tour de France, because this team, Source Sogerson, has had a lot of criticism for not being aggressive in the Tour de France so far as a wild card team. But there, all of a sudden, they've got themselves in the news because he's got himself maximum points there at the top of that climb. And why not a few more later on, and a polka dot jersey for him.
Well, Geraint Thomas didn't take part in the green jersey sprint. He was last of the 6 riders there, and it looks like he's 5th of 5 at the top of the climb. So he's obviously not interested either in the King of the Mountains competition. He's hoping perhaps today, maybe he's riding a very clever race. He may assume he's going to get caught by the boys behind. Oh my goodness me, he's crashed. He just lost his pedal on the curve. Thank heavens there was a space between the cars as he just went straight through the gap there. He looks okay. But it reminds me of when Jean-Louis Augustin crashed on the descent. But look at that, he locked up his bike and a little bit of a slide. Well,
he took a dive there. In fact, probably dived off the bike because he could see he was going to go over the edge, and that's something that a rider will do very quickly indeed. He was lucky that there was a space in the cars there, but in fact, he was the one who made the mistake. He locked up his back wheel and it changed his direction, and all of a sudden, fortunately, there was grass in front of him.
Well, he's off and riding again. He's going to have to take a little bit of chance on the descent now to rejoin those front runners. But so fortunate there was a gap in the parked vehicles there. Let's have a look at it again here. Watch his back wheel as he checks it so suddenly, gets the skid on, and then does a little pirouette through the gap. It will be a soft landing, thank heavens. So it looks great, and I don't think he's hurt, so he should get back okay.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Phil, this is a very technical descent, and once you've had a crash like that on a descent, you do get a little bit scared for a while, and it takes you a while to get your bottle back. I'm not sure who's in the team car this afternoon for Team Sky, but if it's Sean Yates, well, he's doing it again. There's a massive problem here. Every time he touches his brakes, Phil, the back wheel locks up, and I wonder if that's got anything to do with the carbon fibre rims. Watch this again.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen this before. Again, his wheel is locked up. You can see the tyre left on the surface of the road. Well, he's going to be extremely nervous going down the climb now. I've never seen this before. His tyres are obviously very hard. The road is a little bit greasy.
Well, he's been very fortunate on both occasions there, Phil, that there was an exit route on the descent for him to have a nice, safe escape. But he will now have a little bit of fear starting to creep in, and I'm surprised because he's normally an extremely good bike, and look how slow he's going around these corners now.
Well, he's absolutely fine to death now, and I don't blame him because he's lost his nerve on 2 corners there, and it's a problem with the bike rather than his skills. He is a former world champion on the track. He's not afraid of great bike handling, but now it would make it very, very difficult to start descending at speeds of 50 and 55 miles an hour on this descent to try and catch up with the leaders. And the trouble is that breakaway needed this man because he was the strength of it.
No, he certainly was. I'm not sure whether it's Steven de Jong in the car, but Sean Yates, in his own right, was one of the best descenders in the world. He could build a gap of 2 to 3 minutes on a descent like this, and he would have really enjoyed it. But this man, once you've had that little bit of fear, and especially when you've had it on 2 occasions, you're going to lose your bottle going around these corners.
Well, his team car wisely has come behind him now because he wants to let Geraint Thomas see his way down this mountain, which isn't too technical just now, but it will get that way as they go into the valley.
Well, I'm sure those images have been seen by the team managers, because almost all of the team managers in this race, they actually follow the race on television as well. They have somebody driving the car, they watch the race on television, they will have seen that, and they will have passed that information onto their riders. And just by the way, if you've been away, we forgot that these two guys were halfway across the gap, and they're just inside of 4 minutes behind in 7th and 8th position on the road.
Chabanel and Kreuziger go over in, we think, 7th and 8th. We haven't seen Gutierrez, and he hasn't come up on our computer either, but we must assume he's still up ahead. It doesn't really matter anyway, it'll all come out in the wash. These are the regrouping of the 4 leaders, and they must be wondering what on earth happened to the man in black. It may have been a distraction, but there was a Welsh flag flying just as he went off course, and I'm wondering if his eye line went to look at the flag and then he realised. But I've got no excuse for him on the second one.
Well, the second one, I think, was just a question. You just get a little bit jittery once you've had an incident like that, and it takes you a while to get back into the fluidity of being at one with your machine.
Was Kim Anderson, and they've seen that situation, and they've told the riders to take care now on the way down. Johnny Hoogland is still clear of the pack, but there's no points for him, I'm afraid, at the top of the climb. First 5 have gone through, they haven't given us any more, so we don't know where Gutierrez is just yet. And the peloton are up and over the top now, 5:49 for the peloton. So they've just climbed at a regular pace. They haven't really challenged the lead, but they're going to let the mountains decide today. And the next one is a brute. It's the famous one that was in the first day of the first visit to the mountains in the Tour de France 101 years ago. That's the Col de Tourmalet, going up now to 2,115 meters. That's after this descent, of course.
Ooh, there's a crash. There's a massive
pile-up.
pile-up.
Crash there on the same corner. Riders going. The roads must be very, very greasy.
Well, what happened there was, in fact, Thomas Voeckler went round the corner. He put his brakes on. He corrected it, and then he had to pick himself up again. A rider from Euskaltel is down pretty hard indeed, and that looks to me like Sammy Sanchez.
Well, the Olympic champion, because he's got the golden helmet on. Just watch here. It's happened. It was Sammy who went down first. If it is Sammy Sanchez, no, he's up.
Voeckler went down as well. He went down on the left-hand side. He just parked himself against that car, and he was able to pick himself up and get going. But watch Voeckler coming around here. He locks up the back wheel. He's a great bike handler. He controls that off to the side of the road, into the car with quite a bang.
It's exactly the same situation as happened with Geraint Thomas, so it's not Geraint Thomas's bike. They've all got this problem on the back end on these corners. Now, the leaders are backed right off on the descent here. Now, the riders in the Leopard Trek team car have instructed their riders to take care on the descent, so they knew. They're obviously watching on television, as Paul Sherwin has said. They were warned, but it looks like everybody else missed out. Now let's see what goes on. Sitting on the road here is Utersoon, who's on the floor. That's Andreas Kloden, who is down, the best placed on Radio Shack. These boys left sat on the road. There's Johan Brunel, can't believe this, the manager of Radio Shack.
Well, he'd already said before the start of the day he didn't think that Andreas Kloden would have a great day. Well, this is a terrible day because he was already injured on his back. You can see Stewie O'Grady putting his hand down to the guy. Let's take it easy on this descent. O'Grady, no stranger to accidents in the Tour de France himself. He crashed out of the Tour de France dramatically a couple of years ago.
Yes, the Black Wednesday, as we'll always remember it, when we lost 3 top Australian cyclists in crashes that day, including Michael Rogers. Anyway, we're back up with the leaders now. We've caught 1 or 2 big names out in that crash. We've seen Kloden down. Voeckler is back on his bike and racing. Stuart O'Grady and Leopard Trek have backed off the race here to try and let those fallers back in if they can come. I have a feeling it was Samuel Sanchez in the golden helmet as Olympic champion who was on the floor. Now Kloden's got to get back. He should get back okay. I don't know if you'll be aware the race is sort of waiting for him, but we'll see.
Well, Thomas Voeckler controlled his bike exceptionally well there. He was the one who actually provoked that crash by actually locking up his back wheel going around that corner. And as I said, once you've had an incident like this, you lose your nerve a little bit for 3 or 4 or 5 corners before you get yourself back into it.
Well, Kloden is taking it very, very gently while the yellow jersey is getting himself back up into the race, but they're frightened of that corner now. Horrible feeling. They all locked up one after another. And 1 or 2 riders did fall quite hard there. We've no update coming at us at the moment.
Well, one of the other riders who went down there from Euskaltel, I think, was Urtasun.
Yes, it was. Yeah. He hurt his elbow.
Stuart O'Grady on the radio there, talking back to the team car, looking for some advice on what's going on. Philippe Gilbert in a pretty good position there in the red, yellow and black jersey, national champion.
Well, this descent, quite honestly, isn't a real technical descent at the moment. It isn't one we'd normally expect the riders to be caught out on, but there must be a slime of grease on the circuit from the low cloud we've had hanging around the Pyrenees all night.
Yeah, just a little bit of humidity.
Now, as watching the riders continue on this descent, as you can see, it's a reasonably good descent. Normally they feel the thunder down here, ending up to 60 miles an hour, but they're frightened now. They've felt their bikes move too often on the surface. Just one Europe car rider's got onto the front of the peloton to try and get things back into a regular order. These boys should get back. The peloton has slowed right down for them. The Euskaltel rider is Izagir. Crowd will wonder what's happened. Oh, sorry, we're back up with the four leaders at the moment, beg your pardon. I didn't realise we'd switched up to the head of the race. They seem to be descending quite regularly here at the moment. Mangel, Perez, Kadri, Roy has come to the back. Massive crowd on the descent as well as on the climb here. These boys could make an interesting gain over the field here. So even on Bastille Day, the ups and downs of the French cyclist Thomas Voeckler. Happily, he's okay, and he's racing again as we head towards the bottom of the climb, and then we'll follow the start of the Col du Tourmalet.
Get a bit of moisture coming down, and we've had low cloud for the majority of the afternoon here in the high spots of the Pyrenees. That has the road with the dampness on the top, and that's what makes them very precarious.
Well, he's got his gel, which he would like to swallow in his mouth here, Jean, but he can't get round to it. Looks as though he might now. La Seube is where the leaders have got themselves down to now on the descent here as they continue. This is 56 kilometers from the finishing line, and the next town along the route will be the very famous Sainte-Marie de Campin, and that is at the base of the Col du Tourmalet, and it is only 3 kilometers away.
Yeah, this is the real heart of the Campin Valley, which is an area of France which has never lost any of its authenticity with its pastoral backdrop, and for years and years it's been tucked away from the rest of France. As we can see here, it's also become an extremely important part of the Tour de France, and there I think that Union Jack's upside down, Phil.
I think it was actually, but I'll have another look when it comes by. It did look as though it was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's saluting the British riders, and sadly for the moment Geraint Thomas, the Welshman, is having to chase back, but he's still ahead of the main field, because remember, the main field has backed off a little bit. Andreas Kloden, who went past Peter Vellich when he had that problem, they should both be attaching themselves to the rear of the convoy now in the pack. These are the four leaders. Behind the four leaders we do have Jose Ivan Gutierrez and Geraint Thomas, and they are both riding together now, 45 seconds off the pace, that's all.
Well, they've got a very good chance of pulling themselves back into this race. 3.5 minutes for the two chasers, Roman Kreuziger here and Sylvain Chavanel. Chavanel is an incredibly good individual time trialist, formerly the national time trial champion of France, and he's won that title on 2 occasions, but this is the first time that he's ever actually won the road racing championships, and what a glory for a Frenchman to wear the bleu, blanc, rouge on the roads of the Tour de France on Bastille Day.
Absolutely, and he's making sure we know where he is too. He's really driving on now. He's trying to get up to those leaders and give them some great firepower. 3 minutes 22 behind. Remember when they went after them, they were 5 minutes plus, so they are slowly catching up. They'll climb pretty strongly too on the slopes of the Col du Tourmalet. Got a good chance there of getting across if they can.
Good chance to see this lake at the top of the climb here. This is the Paillol Lake. It's situated at an altitude of 1,139 meters, and it's actually at the foot of the Aspin, the Col de l'Aspin, just over to the other side. It's a 10-hectare artificial lake surrounded by some incredible fir trees.
Surrounded by the Tour de France right now as the riders continue to course down. The peloton regrouping here on a semi-plateau as the leaders are trying now to consolidate themselves. Andreas Kloden, who is chasing his way back, he's having a tough time. Slowly but surely though, he's hauling in the peloton. He's still got that injured shoulder, as you can see. The rider with him here is Jakob Fuglsang, number 13. Scurrying back with all the drinking bottles was Adi Engels for the Quick Step team. Meanwhile, this is the riders here. who have gone into the town of Santa Maria de Compain, and that is Sylvain Chavanel and Roman Kreuziger. They started the climb. Now this is Claude getting that cut quickly covered up before he starts the climb of the Col du Tourmalet. Boy, it's a busy day. Well, there we are, back to the medical car for Andreas Claude. Now he's on the foot of the climb. The leaders are on the climb, the chasers are on the climb, and the main peloton are about to be on the climb. Geraint Thomas, joined by Jose Ivan Gutierrez, is now 31 seconds off rejoining the leading group.
Well, that's a great ride by those two riders in 5th and 6th position on the road, but this is medical assistance on the move, and both sides of Andreas Claude have been affected by that very nasty crash. The thing about the Tourmalet, Phil, is it's such a long time. Unlike the climb we've just been up, riders will get eliminated, even if you're just riding at tempo, because it's such a hard, long effort. Probably around about 50 minutes of climbing.
It has been such a busy time in this peloton, but they've had the common sense to slow it down, let these injured boys get back if they can. That has aided, of course, the breakaway, which is now out front by 7 3/4 minutes. Tommy Voeckler has gone straight back to the front with his team to try and control it for as long as possible. 17.1 kilometres, although our board showed us 16.8 today is the normal distance of this climb. Takes us over 2,000 metres. High spot of the journey through the Pyrenees.
Yeah, that's almost 7,000 feet once you get to the top of the Col du Tourmalet. The average gradient to 7.6%, but at the town of La Mongie, Phil, it goes up to 10%.
Here we go. They're making it back through the cars now, so a great chase by Geraint Thomas, who slipped and slid his way down the climb, is now bringing back Gutierrez, who seems to have found his second pair of legs and has recovered from that stomach sickness. He's coming back on the lower slopes of the Tourmalet.
I tell you what, he's a strong boy, Geraint Thomas, there, getting out of the saddle. He's just got his eyes fixed on the back of that red car. That's the car of the race referee, and once he gets back into contact, he might well be starting to dream about the possibility of a stage victory this afternoon, because look at the time gap from this leading group of 6 riders once again to the main field. 7 minutes 43 seconds.
Well, you're right. This traction has now helped the breakaways, because the peloton has been preoccupied, and somebody going to the back here, it looks as though it's Jens Voigt is dropping to the back. He's waving everybody around him, wants his team car for a chat.
I think he's going.
So there's no change now. It's a matter of get on and chase. Geraint Thomas has got himself up in the leading group and back into the virtual yellow jersey. This is the start of the climb now for the peloton, and the boys in green have got their man in yellow to the front again, but they've had a nightmare descent off the previous mountain.
Yep, this is the small town of Santa Maria de Compain, a very famous town in cycling history, because it was at this town that Eugene Christophe actually came to have his forks repaired when he broke his bicycle in the Tour de France. And you weren't allowed to get any assistance in those days, and somebody actually was helping him with the bellows to keep the gas nice and hot, and he was disqualified from the race.
That was in the 20s, and Eugene Christophe, he got a huge time penalty, which left it impossible for him to win the race. And I think he finished in the end in 4th, but in those days you'd be looking at a good hour to the leader. But as the climb starts now, as you see, the board there is saying 16.6. All our information says 17.1, but that's where they put the board. And now the riders are on the climb of the Col du Tourmalet. It's all uphill. Now, what would it take? 17 kilometres, Paul? 40 minutes, 45 minutes?
Between 40 and 50 minutes, depending on how fast they attack the foot of this climb. You may well see the leading group do 45 minutes and the main field do 40, but usually this is a fairly long climb, so close to 50 minutes, I think, on today's stage.
And nervous too. This is the day one in the high mountains. The leaders will be looking at the men they imagine are the leaders of the Tour, sensing out if they're having good days or bad days. My feeling is they won't attack each other. They'll ride this one and let any weaknesses just manifest themselves and see what happens. But the breakaways who've made the decision, looked all set to be caught, have gone away again. And I think realistically, they might stay away to the finish here.
They very well could do. This is the important thing of Geraint Thomas getting himself back into this breakaway. That's Geraint Thomas with the white sunglasses on there. An extremely talented professional athlete. A man I think we will be watching for a number of years at the Tour de France. And why not cutting himself inside of the top 10? Because I reckon he has the ability to climb. And if he rides into the wheel marks of Bradley Wiggins, he could be the next British hope.
Well, Look at these faces. They're now testing Alberto Contador and Cadel Evans.
Joost Postuma is the Dutchman on the front for Leopard Trek, followed by Fabian Cancellara, Stuart O'Grady, Linus Gerdeman. And this is a little bit of a show of strength now. And there you can just see Frank Schleck getting rid of that piece of paper that was just up in front of his jersey. The foundations of one or two riders may now start to crumble a little bit. Alberto Contador looks comfortable. He's got one teammate alongside him. Right behind Contador, just drinking that bottle, is Cadel Evans, the Australian.
And I have to say, looking very nonchalant about the whole thing, despite the fact that his most feared team, Leopard Trek, has gone en masse to the front. Evans casually taking a drink, doesn't look at all out of breath on these slopes at the moment.
This is a very solid team. They said before the start of it, not look for any individual glory at all. They're all here for a single reason, that's to get Frank and Andy Schleck the victory of the Tour de France. And this is where they're starting to lay down the foundations. They're not worried about the breakaway of 6 up the road. They're not worried about Chavanel or Kreuziger. What they want to do is see what damage they can do to Alberto Contador. They want to find out on the first day in the mountains, has Contador got a bad knee, or has he been playing with them and he's been hiding some good form?
You're absolutely right, and they're racing as a team. Stage 12 of the Tour de France here. Radio Shack have got a couple of riders in the pictures as well. Good to see the team HTC High Road have got their man TJ Van Garderen and Tony Martin in contact in this break. But this whole team has put itself on the front. Frank Schleck is the last one of the boys in black there. Maybe they're looking to win for him today. Voigtler knows what's going on and doesn't look under too much pressure as the race leader either just now. Fabian Cancellara, Postuma's already gone. Cancellara will go for as long as possible, then he will disappear as well.
Well,
Ernie Eisel, who was going off to look after Mark Cavendish, has just picked him up and is going to try and put him back in the bunch, and then he'll probably drop off and look for Mark Cavendish.
Well, Roman Kreuziger has decided that Sylvain Chavanel is not just as good a climber as he is, and he's taken off on his own. He's currently looking at around about 2 minutes from the leading group of 6 riders. He today, Roman Kreuziger, could be the dark horse that spoils the party for the big pre-race favourites on the slope of the Luz Ardiden.
But you've got to admire Sylvain Chavanel. He's not taken himself into the zone he can't cope with. Climbers like to climb at their speed. He knows if Kreuziger gets up with those leaders, then they might slow down and he will get up, albeit taking that little bit longer. And the crowds here, don't forget, really are still on the lower slopes of the Col de Tourmalet as we zigzag our way up today, as we climb up through the col itself.
Well, the big crowds, Phil, I think will start to appear once we get up to La Mongie. A lot of people camped for the last couple of days at La Mongie, which is the ski resort around about 6 kilometres to the summit of the climb. Around about 15% of the winner's time is the time that you have to finish within.
A little bit of a changing of the guard at the front. Here comes the catch. I don't think that Jose Ivan Gutierrez will have it. He's going to try. He went back last time, don't forget, with Geraint Thomas, but the rhythm is very, very steady and strong by Roman Kreuziger. He's not going to accelerate. He's just going to keep on the pressure, and I think that'll prove too good for Gutierrez. Now, Tony Martin, this is a little bit of a surprise. That's why I was hesitating there, because I didn't think it could be Tony Martin.
Well, he had said before the start of the Tour de France, Phil, that he felt he had the possibility of a top 10 finish in his legs, but that doesn't look to be the case this afternoon. Great individual time trials. Maybe he's left a lot of energy on the roads of the flatlands working for the sprinters of his team.
Look at this now. Jeremy Roy, Geraint Thomas and Ruben Perez are the only 3 riders left here at the front now as they push on. They've got rid of everybody else. Coming up, but not coming up quite so quickly now, is Kreuziger. In fact, he's lost ground a little bit. He's fallen back to 34 seconds on those 3 leaders. And it looks as though we've got Christian Vande Velde, the American rider here, has finished 4th in the Tour de France. Surprisingly in trouble here now. His face is looking very determined. He hasn't got to hang on very much longer, but it's still a little way to the summit.
About 8 kilometres, 5 miles. Sorry about that, Phil. It's a long way from the summit. It's 6 kilometres to the summit from the town of La Mongie, and they're still about 2 kilometres away currently, so he's going to have to pull himself inside out to stay in that group. His teammate, Tommy Danielson, is still in the group, so he's fairly comfortable. That's the spread of the race, Phil. We're looking at 35 seconds back to Kreuziger, and now that Geraint Thomas has gone to the front, Kreuziger's not actually getting across the gap anymore.
No, he stopped getting across the gap, and it looks as though they don't want him to rejoin until after the top of the climb. He probably would rejoin on the way down. We're underneath a little shed here, which is used for the snow and the avalanches in the winter period, so the ride's protected here from the landslips as they race through. 3:12 is the gap, and it looks like they may have eased a little bit, so Van der Velde may get back on here. But once we get into La Mongie, that's where it kicks so steep in the town itself.
That's right. That's 10% the average gradient from just around the corner here, right up through La Mongie, and then they start to climb out of the tree zone. It gets a lot more open. Forgotten that this man was still out on the road on his own, because Sylvain Chavanel is currently 2.5 minutes behind the 3 leaders.
In the town of La Mongie, where it was raining when we came through last time, but it's nice and dry at the moment. A massive crowd here, and now being unshipped from the back is young Ruben Perez, as Thomas is going alone. He's riding away for them on the Col de Tourmalet as he breaks out into open countryside very shortly, and the top is over on the ridge there.
Well, he's got about 6 kilometers to go to the summit of this climber. This is the ski resort for the Tourmalet La Mongie as well. It's a ski resort that goes between 1,800 meters and 2,500 meters. There are 60 kilometers of ski runs in this part of the world, but what a great job being done here by Geraint Thomas.
He should only have about 4K to go as he breaks the town here, as he comes up towards the summit now, as Geraint Thomas has decided now is the time to push on, excuse me, and forget everybody else.
Yep, 4.5 kilometers is the distance once he leaves town here. He's got Roman Kreuziger, who is still locked in at about 21 seconds behind him, but all of a sudden the man from Wales is completely possessed by this climb, and of course by the huge crowd that have turned out to come and watch.
And this is the Jacques Godet Memorial Climb as well, as a big prize at the top of this climb. I think it's around £5,000 for the first man over the top, and Geraint Thomas is in the hat for that now as he rides on. You've got that spread over the field from Thomas to the Maillot Jaune group at 3 minutes 8 seconds. It's all been Leopard Trek in incessant pacemaking there, but there's still 30-35 riders sitting right behind them and planning their next move. They've now picked up Sylvain Chavanel. He is swept in. What is surprising is there are so many riders still climbing to the top of the Tourmalet in that big pack.
Well, there's going to be a moment of interest here as number 11, the man who is expecting to win. Oh, yeah, he's going to change bikes. Well, front wheel puncture.
Front wheel puncture. The watch is on him, and this is a good wheel. They knew what was coming. They'd signaled the fact. No panic by Andy. Good change, back in the action.
That was inside of 10 seconds. At a moment of panic, he's got teammates on the front. They will get the word from Andy Schleck as Laurens ten Dam sees this as an opportunity to pop off the front end of the peloton. You can see Leopard Trek, Phil, they've shut down the chase there because they're waiting for Andy to come back in.
Laurens ten Dam is having a great season as he tries to move clear of the field. Now we've got Katusha also using some men here.
Well, this is Trofimov, Yuri Trofimov of Russia, seeing this as an opportunity. This is the time when we may well all of a sudden start to see the chinks appearing in certain riders' armour.
1 kilometre to go for Thomas, as Geraint Thomas and Jeremy Rod desperately fighting. He's got about 950 metres to catch Geraint Thomas and be a Frenchman on Bastille Day to top the highest point of the Pyrenees. And Geraint Thomas is pushing on. He's waiting for no one. This is a big moment in the life of the Welshman in his 3rd Tour de France. Running completely smoothly at the moment, but they must feel they've got the strength at the end. Well, this is a nice little attack. Is this Richie Porte having a dig here, or is it in fact Hernandez who's gone? Well, they sprinted clear of the field. Now it's up to Schleck, who is going now to coming up to the side there. He's got to get things organised. They're all going to hit these boys in Leopard Trek right now.
Well, there's a problem for Anthony Charteau at the back. This is a wrong time to have a flat tyre, Anthony Charteau, but he's going to have to take a few risks to get back into the race now to look after Thomas Voeckler. Jens Voigt has gone right across the gap there and chased down Jesus Hernandez.
He's done a good job at it too, by the look of it, and Voeckler is just sitting in there at the moment, as we now see that Geraint Thomas has been joined by Jeremy Roy. The Frenchman would love to win the climb today, being Bastille Day and the biggest climb and the biggest prize of the Pyrenees.
Well, the gaps are starting to appear in the peloton, as you can see there. Jens Voigt has gone across there to Jesus. We said that the team of Saxo Bank was not the strongest team in the world, but now all of a sudden they're turning the tables around and throwing it back at Leopard Trek.
Well, they're hitting him at the time when it really are losing the riders now. Andy and Frank Schleck have got back together at the rear of the field. Jens Voigt no longer wants to set any pace because he doesn't want to destroy his team leader. As now Jeremy Roy races up towards the summit of the Col de Tourmalet. Can Geraint Thomas find just a little bit more effort to take out the prize at the top? Because Jeremy Roy is really a big surprise. Whenever he does something big, it's always a big surprise. He's been one of the most attacking riders in the Tour de France this year.
Started his season off extremely well with the first win in the first race of the year on the French calendar, the Grand Prix Marseillaise. Jérôme Coppel, the leader of Sources, he's going backwards while Jeremy Roy is starting to prize open a slight advantage over Geraint Thomas.
And the thing about the Col de Tourmalet, it climbs right to the line and then it starts to descend immediately back down to the valley below. It looks like Andreas Klöden is now in trouble from that fall. He's losing ground near the top. He's just got to close his eyes, grit his teeth, and hope that finish comes very, very quickly now as he gets released by the peloton. Igor Martinez used to be his teammate, coming up alongside him on Euskadi.
Well, Jesus Hernandez came to the front at 1 kilometre to go. He was replaced by Jens Voigt. Voigt will not lay down. This is a great fighter. This is a man. Oh, and Jeremy Roy is going to get himself maximum points and a €5,000 prize purse at the top of this climb as Geraint Thomas goes over in second place.
Well, a great fight back by Jeremy Roy to come back to Geraint's side and gets the first prize over the top of the Tourmalet. Thomas goes over in second. These boys are setting themselves up, though, you know, for a real shot at winning the stage.
The first 2 kilometres of the descent of the summit of the Tourmalet are very, very grippy and precarious, very technical. Here you've got a number of hairpin bends. You can see the first one coming around here. You've got to slow down to around about 25 miles an hour to be able to get yourself across the apex of the corner. Geraint Thomas is not comfortable at all on these descents.
Well, Jeremy Roy has now got 20 points there. He also scored on the previous climb, so he's now the new leader of the King of the Mountains as he heads on the descent down towards the valley below. Kreuziger is coming up the mountain. He'll be riding for third place, I think.
Well, in fact, we should still have Ruben Perez and Kadri out on the course as Jens Voigt has come back to the front end and he's continuing to dish out the pain. Vladimir Karpets at the back end of the main field, the leader of Team Katusha. He's been joined here by Sandy Kassar, but these are men who are being tailed off from the leading group.
And as we quickly go by all of the riders now, left behind by the pace, that's David Moncoutier who's just passed through, the last Frenchman to win on Bastille Day. Maxime Monfort, another Leopard Trek rider, has now been dispatched. They're only left with a couple of riders back there right now.
Ryder Hejjedal going backwards.
One rider, there's Ryder Hejjedal of Canada also in trouble.
Well, also a little bit further forward there, Xavier Zandio, the rider from Team Sky. We're picking up riders. One of the Jesus Hernandez after that attack, Phil, he's just got popped off the back there.
We're moving up to this group now. This is Kreuziger here, and that's the professional foul when you hand out the bags. Oh, they've got food bags here, which I don't think are legal at this point of the race. 3 minutes, 6 seconds, the spread.
Actually, what they're handing up in those bags, they're handing up raincoats for the descent because it's going to be extremely chilly. We're looking at a temperature of not much more than 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit over the top of these climbs, but with the speed these riders go downhill, it makes it extremely cold. We're looking at speeds on the descent in excess of 50 miles an hour.
Kreuziger goes over the top, 2 minutes, 11 seconds behind the two leaders at the front. We normally see them grab newspapers to put up their jerseys because they're really good at shutting out the wind, but they put the bit of plastic on there today. This is Mangel, and Lawrence Tendam has picked him up, and Lawrence Tendam is going to take him on for the sprint as well.
Well, Tendam is a rider, doesn't win very many races. He's won 4 races in his career, but he in fact finished 5th overall in the Santos Tour Down Under in January and finished 8th overall in the Tour of Switzerland. So you can't let a man like him just ride off the front of the pack.
He wasn't on the original Tour team for Rabobank, but his fine riding seal that, especially with his performance in the Tour de Suisse just before this race. And he's ridden very well up the Tourmalet too. as he goes over. Look at the face of Jens Voigt trying to bring up the Maillot Jaune. Well, it's been no problem for Thomas Voeckler. He has enjoyed his day today in yellow. Now he's only got one climb to worry about as he goes over the top. 3 minutes 10 seconds behind the leader.
Well, this is a great ride by the Belgian national champion as well, because I don't think Philippe Gilbert has ever ridden over the top of some of these climbs in the presence of some pre-Tour de France favourites.
Now, this is when we get dizzy going down. How much has the previous shenanigans on the last climb, last descent, affected the mentality now of Geraint Thomas? He'll be a bit worried about the way down, but I think the road is much better on this descent.
Well, it's on the first 2 kilometres where you've got the very tricky technical part of this descent, and now once we start to get down to 2-3 kilometres down, the roads and the bends are much more like sweepers, and I think they will go towards the advantage of Geraint Thomas. But on these sweeping bends, we're looking all the time at a speed in excess of 50 miles an hour. Sean Yates, a number of years ago, when he was still riding on the descent on the other side of the Col de Tourmalet, Phil, recorded a speed approaching 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, and you've got to break down very, very hard for these sharp right-handers. Stick your knee out and alter your body weight to get the bike around the corner. Thomas looks a lot better now, though. Here comes that peloton of very select riders who have not been destroyed by the pacemaking of Leopard Trek, but a lot of their team has, because they're not here anymore.
That's Levi Leipheimer there, riding behind the rider in the blue raincoat on this descent, and he's obviously recovered a fraction from his nasty crash. We'll have to see whether or not Andreas Kloden can recover on this descent to get back into the main field, but the yellow jersey is still looking very comfortable on the shoulders of Thomas Voeckler.
Well, we're looking now at about a 12-mile descent down into the valley, around about 18 kilometres, as they drop down to the village of Luz-Saint-Sauveur, and then they climb out of that 13 kilometres up to the finishing line, which is still low cloud, but plenty of good visibility for the actual roads around us. There we are, confirmation that Jeremy Roy has now got the lead in the King of the Mountains. He's got 24 points. Hoogeland has got 22, and Geraint Thomas has 18.
Well, you can see riders just over on the left-hand side there scrambling to get themselves back into contact. That's a leading group now of about 25 riders, but I think by the time we get to the bottom, it'll probably swell up to around about 50 before we start the final climb of the day.
Still a pretty safe descent, this part of the Col de Tourmalet, even though the roads are unguarded here. They've got to be very, very careful as they make their way down. And I think there's at least 35 riders in that select group on the descent.
And it will swell, because I've seen other riders making and taking risks on the descent to keep themselves in contact. This is going to be a good chase up the climb of the Col de la Luzardiden, because Geraint Thomas has still got a lot of energy in those legs, and he's got a good partner with him in Jeremy Roy.
He's got one of the most aggressive riders in this year's Tour. Looking here at Thomas Voeckler, who's also wanting to see his way down this mountain. He doesn't want a repetition of what happened on La Hoquette. So the yellow jersey still sitting in prime position as we head towards the last climb of the day at Luz. Well, we're looking at the peloton going down here. They're being led down by the Maillot Jaune, the yellow jersey of Thomas Voeckler. And as we pan down, there's about 40 riders in that group at the moment. They are really moving too. They're going just short of 60 miles an hour down this descent last time we checked their speed. There's still gaps in that peloton. The two leaders are heading down to the bottom. They're going under the banner here, 25 kilometers from the finish. Geraint Thomas and Jeremy Roy of France, the Frenchman inspired by Bastille Day today. Thomas flying the flag for his country, which is Wales, and they're heading to the valley now for the final climb.
Well, I just had a quick look at the computer there, Phil, and we had a maximum speed on that descent by these two riders at 61 miles an hour, 100 kilometers an hour downhill.
Perfect. And it's a good descent. The roads are perfectly dry, the surface is good, the roads are sweepers. Even at Luzardiden now, the sky is high now. All the cloud has blown itself away from the finishing zone. But look at this now, the peloton. This is the return of David Moncoutier coming to the back of the field. There's still a lot of riders in that peloton.
No, it's swelling up. I would say by the time we get to the bottom, we will be up to around about 50 riders. Look at the way they snake their way around these corners. There are still a number of riders in there with red and black jerseys of BMC Racing. They'd still be looking after Cadel Evans. But we're going to have a showdown on this final climb of the day, Phil, because that's why I think we've seen all this pressure being put on the peloton by Leopard Trek. And why not a little dance from Andy Schleck and Frank Schleck. Alberto Contador now looking a lot better, moving himself up into third position.
Well, he knows now that they must have put on the pressure for a reason, and it's going to become apparent on the last climb of the day. They're going to attack the two brothers, and so Contador will mark them very, very closely now. So too will Cadel Evans, and it might well be that the four favourites for the Tour de France will launch an attack together. It's all possible.
I think the big power of Leopard Trek is the two-pronged attack that Frank Schleck and Andy Schleck can offer, because they can attack alternatively, because I think that Frank Schleck is probably nurturing form which is almost equal to that of his brother Andy. In fact, in the recent Tour of Switzerland, Frank Schleck was a lot better than Andy Schleck, who was progressing all of the time but never really showed us the form that he had 12 months ago in the Tour.
Well, don't forget, Frank Schleck has won twice in the Alps. In fact, Alpe d'Huez and the Grand Bornand, two very hilly stages, so he won't be afraid of what lies ahead on the road today. 22.5 kilometres now to go. We're still out front with Geraint Thomas and Jeremy Roy. 3 minutes 16 as they race in good sunshine, not exactly scorching hot, but good sunshine on the descent, heading down to Les Saint-Sauveur, and then we've got the 13-kilometre climb to the finish. The peloton is down to about 40 riders at the moment, as they this is the chase of Kreuziger. He's just gone under 25 to go, so he's losing ground.
Well, Tendam, where's number 48? He's a good rider. He's been on Rabobank for quite a number of years now, and he finished high up in the Tour of Switzerland. As you said, that's where he got his selection for the Tour de France, and he's trying to consolidate his position. What a team Rabobank. When we looked at Rabobank in the Criterium de Dauphiné and the Rabobank team that went to the Tour of Switzerland, I thought that was going to be one of the strongest France, and on this first day in the mountains.
Yes, he has, and he cracked big time. Back to the peloton. This is Philippe Gilbert, the Belgian champion, who's having a great ride today. Still running Mark Cavendish as close as he can for that green jersey. There's points for the green jersey at the end of the stage, and Mark won't be scoring those, but he's had a good start to the day. He got 9 points earlier on. Tendam then, they've now pulled back here. Mangel and Tendam have come up to Roman Kreuziger. So now we've got two leaders and three chasers.
Well, actually, we've forgotten about Ruben Perez and Boyle Kadri, still stuck in the middle there at 1 minute. So they're in third and fourth place on the road. And these riders here now are looking at fifth place on the road.
Yeah, fourth, fifth and sixth. As they start the descent down at the moment. They might get together, but Kreuziger clearly has made a big effort here, and he's started to feel the pressure of the day. We're still at the last climb time to come. My bet will be on Laurens Tendam to move up on his own once the slopes up to Les Ardiden begin. So as we look here at Philippe Gilbert, today's commercial free is brought to you by Nissan and the 100% electric Nissan car. Gilbert is literally freewheeled away from the head of the peloton in the last 2 kilometres. Well, he's showing them a clean pair of wheels on the descent as they come down, and the peloton again have stayed all together as Philippe Gilbert has gone away from the field. He's going to get a run on the climb. 15 kilometres to go for the two leaders here, as Geraint Thomas is in black. The white jersey there is held by Jeremy Roy. 15 kilometres from an incredible result.
Well, at 15 kilometres to go, Phil, we're right in the heart now of Les Saint-Sauveur. They've got to ride across the town for about 1.5 kilometres, and then all of a sudden, if you crane your neck over to the right-hand side, you can look right up here to where the finishing line is at Les Ardiden. About to start the last climb of the day, though, is the Welshman Geraint Thomas, joined there by the man who has been pretty impressive on the descent as we go across this bridge, Phil, known as the Pont Napoleon, the Bridge of Napoleon, built at the special request of the Emperor Napoleon III between 1859 and 1863.
And the town loves the Tour, it certainly does. It's turned out in its 100% support today. These are the three riders chasing. There's still 4 riders in front of them, isn't there? 4 in front, 3 here, and then the field of then we get Gilbert, and they're really starting this climb quite split up, really. 3:22 the gap as they come up now. These boys are coming up to 15 kilometres to go.
Yep, well, that's the end of the day for Laurent Mangel, one of the riders in that breakaway that started after a mere 2 kilometres of the race. Next group on the road, Philippe Gilbert looks over his shoulder at Christophe Reblon to say, well, how far are we off the front end of the peloton this afternoon, and where is Thomas Voeckler? Voeckler right now, Phil, will be starting to dream that he can hold on to this yellow jersey for another day. But we're about to set ourselves up for a big battle.
He goes to the foot of the climb with his nearest competitor, Cadel Evans, 2 minutes 26 behind him in the overall, because we have lost the second man overall, Luis Leon Sanchez, today. So that's how we start the climb, at 15 to go for the peloton.
I thought...
Got back in time to be dropped again there on the climb. This is now Sanchez at the front as they continue. Philippe Gilbert's up for the fight in that black jersey. Lawrence Tendam is there. They are coming up on the 2 leaders. According to our computer, they're about 2 minutes 19 behind Thomas and Roy, and in between is one lone rider, Biel Kadri of AG Tour.
Sammy Sanchez finished 5th overall in Paris-Nice at the start of this year. He won the Grand Prix Miguel Indurain, and he won a very big mountain stage of the Tour of the Pays Basque. But in the peloton now, or what remains of the peloton this afternoon, it's still Jens Voigt on the front, but still sitting pretty comfortably there in the yellow jersey is Thomas Voeckler.
So Perez, having done his bit to get his teammate away and having been in the lead for most of the day, is now dropped back to see how many's left in the peloton. He won't be surprised to see the black jersey of Leopard Trek setting the pace, and I don't suppose he'll be surprised about it being Jens Voigt either. This is at the tail of the bunch now, as again they're all being dropped off the back by the speed here. Andrei Zeitz has gone for Kazakhstan.
David Moncoutier again going backwards. He's a tough character. Watch out for him over the next couple of days, because he'll look for a move on one day or another. Vladimir Karpets now getting eliminated. Also Jérôme Coppel, the leader of Soor Sojasun,
who is the great young French hope for the future, but he's having a rough ride in the Tour de France today. Kreuziger wiped out. Jens Voigt just stamping on those pedals, trying to tear his bike in half, I think. He'll go to his legs, can go no longer, and then he'll drop off.
Well, just
Lawrence Tendam is being swept up. Trofimov is being swept up.
Slowly but surely they're picking up all of these riders. A great job of work by Liquigas Cannondale, and now number 6 is dropping off the back. This is Chris Anker Sorensen being eliminated.
Well, they will apply plan A in the end, Saxo Bank, because the last man supposedly to stay with Contador will be Richie Porte. So don't forget, our commercial free is brought to you by Nissan and the 100% electric Nissan Leaf. Well, they're throwing everything into this final climb now. Nicolas Roche here, whose father Stephen won the Tour de France in 1987. He's just opening a gap. His father's on the Tour too. He'd be shouting at him from somewhere to try and get him back onto the end. He's going off the back, just over 8 kilometres from the finish today. Tendam is concentrating himself. He's not given up yet.
Well, I tell you what, I've got my fingers crossed for Thomas Voeckler here this afternoon, Phil. He's doing a storming ride as we see Philippe Gilbert going to the back end of this group. Voeckler is itching to keep that yellow jersey. He wants it for one more day, and he may well keep it for 2. If he can hold it at the top of Luzardiden, I reckon he might be able to get over the Col de l'Aubisque tomorrow.
I really wouldn't worry about Thomas Voeckler. He's handling himself very well, but we are hearing the splitters come at the front. It's not good news for Geraint Thomas. He's been distanced, and it's been proved. Here's the shots. Sanchez is pressing on here with Van der Dert. The other two are now behind these two as they push on for the finish of today's stage in the mountains.
Well, it's not surprising. It was a great ride, a brave ride by Geraint Thomas, but this man is a champion. He's an Olympic champion, but he's only got a 38-second advantage over the yellow jersey group.
Gilbert hanging on now, but still has a little bit of a rhythm there.
Well, the crack is starting to appear, and the gap keeps being left there, Phil, by Andy Schleck. Schleck has not been able to stay on the wheel of Cadel Evans. He's had to pull himself a little bit inside out there to come up to Evans's wheel. It's because of the pace being dictated here by Liquigas Cannondale.
It may be a little overconfidence on Andy Schleck's side. He's not looking as good now. As I say, he's destroyed his team, and he didn't destroy his rivals. They are still sat there on the climb. This is Van Aert. Prepared now to go up. My goodness me, if Jelle Van Aert was to win the stage, we'd all be rushing to the record books to find out exactly who he is. First Tour de France for this man, and he showed us he can climb. He had a great Giro d'Italia last year, so we know he can climb. but he's proving it now to everybody in the Tour de France.
And he was a great ally for Philippe Gilbert in the Ardennes Classics in the early part of the season. Jérôme Roy now about to see what it looks like at the front end of the big express from Liquigas.
Well, Ivan Basso first shot into our living rooms when he won a stage of the Tour de France, the only one he's ever won. And guess where he won it, Paul? In La Mongie, where we came through earlier today. Now he sits second wheel here behind Sylvester Schmidt, his teammate. As they continue to go, I thought we saw Tommy D there in that group. Now that's a superb ride. He will accelerate up the overall classification tonight.
Yes, he will become the overall leader of Team Garmin-Cervelo. He started the day in 17th place, looking for 4:22, but it's a question of what the gaps will be at the end of the day. The yellow jersey on the shoulders of Thomas Voeckler is doing a phenomenal ride here this afternoon, while everybody else has really been put onto the back foot.
Moment, it's good news. They're going clear still. This is Alberto Contador, the greatest climber in the world, but he doesn't look it right now. He's had to do an acceleration because whatever we said about Andy Schleck, he's just attacked, and Contador saw it and has gone. So did Cadel Evans. They've all lifted their game. The four favourites are going.
Well, that was just a little dummy move there as Andy Schleck came to the front, and immediately the response came from Alberto Contador, and they're all slowly... Oh, there's a move by Frank Schleck now. It was going to be the 1-2.
That is the 1-2. It was the dummy by Andy. Now they've got to go. Basso's onto him straight away as Frank Schleck has made the move. Ivan Basso has come across, gritting his teeth, but Contador has gone, and Andy Schleck is really gritting his teeth. Also, the Petit Prince, Cunego in pink, has joined up as well. Evans is there too. They've got to control Schleck now.
Well, this is all the damage at the back, but Frank Schleck, I think this year could very well be the secret weapon for Leopard Trek, because he's gone again and he's forcing Alberto Contador onto the defensive. Cadel Evans just sitting there watching the party. Little nod of the head there for Andy Schleck, saying, no, I can't go over the top of this one.
4 kilometres to go. We're watching the real race here now. The two boys up front have lost about 10 seconds of the lead with that attack and that counter-attack, as they now have unshipped Levi Leipheimer a little bit there. He's going to have to hope they slow down a bit. Now here's the attack we expected earlier from Ivan Basso. He's waited for the Schlecks to use energy. They've had to come back at him. Contador, Basso, Cadel Evans and Frank Schleck.
And still in contact, 1-8-1 in the yellow jersey, Thomas Voeckler. That was a series of attacks there. Nobody could actually get a little bit of time between themselves and everyone else. Schleck looking very nervous, looking left, looking right, waiting for another move to come from his brother, and here it is again.
This is the next attack by the champion of Luxembourg, and Contador has kicked again, so too has Cadel Evans. They're going after Frank Schleck because long-term, they always think Andy is the man to beat to Paris, but Frank is throwing in the ricochets now, and they're not giving him any leeway at all.
Matching every move and every person in the red and black jersey, BMC Racing. Cadel Evans looking very calm and collected. He doesn't need to go on the attack today, Phil, because he's the highest place of all of the pre-race favourites.
Absolutely, but they know yellow jersey unless he gets 2 minutes and 6 seconds ahead of the yellow jersey, and the yellow jersey's right with them. Tommy Voeckler enjoying his day. Now they're all looking at each other and say, well, have you got any more to throw at me? Because we're all still here.
Well, Ivan Basso realises this is the moment to go forward. And let's not forget, there are still 2 riders off the front of this race. Jelle Venendet and, of course, Samy Sanchez, the Olympic champion. 1:08, sliding backwards now. This is Jean-Christophe Perrault of France.
Well, as Perrault takes his final gasps there and then decides, I can't handle Lee's lifting of the speeds, he slipped away from a group of what was 19 riders here. This is Taremi at the front, the leader of the Cofidis team. A good climber he is too, struggling as well. The only rider up front there now alongside the yellow jersey, and he's in the green there, is Pierre Rolland, the last survivor of Europcar.
Well, Pierre Rolland, a big star for the future, rode extremely well in the Critérium de Dauphiné, and he's come up to the lieutenant position for Thomas Voeckler. Voeckler now at 3 kilometres to go, Phil, is looking very confident of retaining his yellow jersey at the end of today's stage. They've another move by Frank Schleck again.
Well, that's another acceleration, and this time they're a little bit slow in the reaction because they had Rolland on the front, who is only concerned to look after his yellow jersey, and that is the gap. Now they're going to have to react from the main field.
Well, this was the move. We were expecting this to be the big 1-2, and this is going to be the recipe, Phil, throughout the whole of the Pyrenees and the whole of the Alps as well. The two Schleck brothers, I think, are almost on identical form in the Tour de France this year, if not, Andy, a little bit behind Frank.
Well, it could be. At the moment, Frank Schleck only has to get about 100 metres in front of Cadel Evans, and he'll be sitting in second place overall tonight, because that's the spread between these boys at the front of the race. Pierre Roland is still kicking there to protect the yellow jersey. Frank Schleck cannot get the time lost in the remaining kilometres of the race today. He was looking for 2.5 minutes to become the Maillot Jaune, and he's only got 2 kilometres to do to get that.
Well, he was only looking as well on 3 seconds to leapfrog ahead of Cadel Evans, and he's got the form. Let's not forget he's a former winner of the Alpe d'Huez stage of the Tour de France, and the way he's pedalling here, Phil, he really looks like he's going for it.
Well, he keeps checking over his shoulder. As I say, this hill just zigzags all its way to the summit. There's no relaxation on the climb. If he overjudge it, he will crack. These two are just going through the crowds as big as we've ever seen at Luz Ardiden rather. Looking at the next finish there, it's 2 kilometres to go for Van Aert and for Samuel Sanchez.
Well, Samuel Sanchez right now, Phil, is probably thinking to himself, well, I don't know how I'm going to get around this guy in the sprint finish towards the end, because Van Aert has not won many races throughout his career, but he's a man who's always been fairly close to the front end of the race. I think the best position he had this year was he in fact finished 6th in the Flèche Wallonne race. In fact, and that was to help his own teammate Philippe Gilbert get the win. But he's moving up probably into second place overall at the start of the day. Now Cadel Evans makes the move.
And look at this, Cadel Evans feeling his second place overall, as it would be if it had stayed status quo tonight. He's now going to chase Frank Schleck if he can. He's doing his turn at lifting the pace. These are riders now behind the race here, being tailed off all of the time, and sadly that looks like Tommy Danielson has just lost contact.
Well, the gap now as Ivan Basso accelerates over the top of Cadel Evans. They're now starting to open the gap on the yellow jersey. Alberto Contador moves, and again shadowed by Andy Schleck.
And shadowed by Tommy Voigtler as he gets across to join the other two. It's true what they say about the yellow jersey. It makes you ride like two men, and Voigtler has gone across to the back wheel of Basso.
Well, he almost got to the back wheel, but I think he was pushing himself to a bridge just a little bit too far. Then now, as we can see, Andy Schleck trying to bridge the gap to Basso and Cadel Evans. Andy Schleck knows he can't let Cadel Evans get too far up the road.
Well, Contador and Schleck has danced their way to the leaders there, but how much more have these riders got? They've given everything to try and break each other up. Cadel Evans now is pushing on. It looks as though Tommy Voigtler, knowing he's going to stay yellow tonight, hasn't got a lot more left. Pierre Roland has stayed with him. He'll lose seconds, but he won't lose that yellow jersey tonight. Go on, kick again.
Well, he's given absolutely everything. A little word of instruction to his teammate Pierre Roland. What he has to ride now, Phil, is sensibly. He can give away 2.5 minutes on Cadel Evans. Well, he can give away 2:25 and still remain in the lead at the end of the day.
But it's steep all of the way. 1 kilometre to go now for the two riders at the front, Samuel Sanchez and Jelle Van Aert, who wiped out Geraint Thomas and Jeremy Roy at the start of this climb. They raced for first and second. Frank Schleck, the Luxembourg champion, is free to fly, but can he close down 47 seconds in a kilometre? It's all uphill. I suppose it's possible, and that is 47 seconds. You can see them.
Well, in fact, he's coming even closer now, Phil. He's gone through that point at 25 seconds behind Sammy Sanchez and Van Aert. As you can see, Cadel Evans knows what he has to do. He's also pulling himself inside out.
Well, Voigtler has his faithful teammate there nursing him up to the finishing line. Cadel Evans here is racing to keep a high overall, but this has been a good day for the Australian. Basso has now put his colours on the mast. He's a candidate for victory. So too Damiano Cunego in the pink. The champion defending us at the back here. He must wonder how the world of cycling has changed in the last 12 months.
Well, Cadel Evans riding really like a man possessed here, taking the responsibility of the chase behind Sammy Sanchez and, of course, behind Frank Schleck. But still, these two men, Phil, are surviving. They're looking around every corner. He says, have a look down there. We better keep working together because those guys are coming back very quickly, and especially this man, Frank Schleck.
Sanchez knows he has a problem with that Belgian cyclist. He doesn't know how to get rid of him, and he's gambling Van Aert. He's going to jump in before they get to the finishing line, I think. And they've got to play carefully because Frank Schleck is coming quickly. Now, as our camera has opened the gap on the Petit Prince there, and look at this, they better go soon, because Frank Schleck now is going to take this race, as he did in the Grand Bournon, as he did on Alpe d'Huez. He's never won in the Pyrenees, but that, I think, is about to change. But there goes the Belgian. He saw him coming, and I'm not sure Sanchez realised that attack came at 500 metres.
Well, Sanchez was right onto his wheel there, and he's gone onto his wheel around the corner. That was a moment of panic by the Belgian. Sammy Sanchez is in the ideal position now. As you can see, Van der Nert is tuning the lead out.
Well, he's got to keep on going, because Frank Schleck is not going to relax the chase now. Sanchez is gambling here. This will be his biggest win since his gold medal in Beijing. I don't think there's a second kick coming from Frank Schleck here, but I think there's a second kick going to come from the Belgian rider, the revelation today in the mountains, but the champion of the Olympic Games in Beijing. He's got it in the end, the final acceleration from Sammy Sanchez, and he's disappeared into the mist of Les Ardiden, and he's going to win this by far and away his greatest one-day victory, apart of course from his gold medal win in Beijing. Terrific ride for Samuel Sanchez. He'll climb up the overall a little bit tonight, but that wasn't his aim today. He wanted to win the first of the big mountain stages of this year's Tour de France, and he has.
Well, that was a greatly well-timed sprint for him as he comes up, just keeping himself in second place. Yellow Van der Nert, he made the mistake as the acceleration now, and it looked like there's a little bit of a gap here. Where is Alberto Contador?
Seconds being lost, Contador's been unhitched, and Cadel Evans is in this as he goes through on the inside. There's fourth place at stake here. Cadel Evans on the wheel of Basso. Contador has been dropped as he comes up the climb. The champion is losing more seconds on his own playground now, and a lot of seconds as Basso gets fourth, Andy Schleck gets fifth, Cadel Evans is sixth, Cunego is seventh, and Contador, the clock is counting. It's not a lot, but it's time lost in the Tour de France for Contador.
And it's time for Cadel Evans to open up the gap. But Thomas Voeckler will keep his yellow jersey this afternoon. Look at his face, he's looking at the clock, Phil, and he knows. Well done, thanks very much, mate. Still in yellow.
Yes, absolutely. Shades of when Lance Armstrong couldn't rip it off his shoulders in the Alps either, and he's fought his way up to the top in the Pyrenees. He keeps yellow at least for one more day. Tommy Danielson comes in, an acceleration up the overall classification for the American tonight. He was already the best American overall. He's gone even better now. And this is the other American, Levi Leipheimer, fighting his way up to the finish.
This is Arnaud Jonosson, one of the young riders in this race. As you can just see, that's Rigoberto Urán coming in there from Team Sky with Levi Leipheimer, who's lost himself about 1 minute and 26 seconds.
Unhitched about 5k out from the finish, but what an incredible race, and it's left a lot of question marks, and it has made Frank Schleck look rather good for the rest of this tour. Sammy Sanchez, the Olympic champion, wins from the big surprise in yellow Van der Nert. Third place went to Frank Schleck, fourth to Ivan Basso.
Well, Frank Schleck will move up into second place overall at the end of the day, Phil, ahead of Cadel Evans now. If that's not throwing down the gauntlet, I don't know what is.
But what it has shown us is that about 7 riders in this race capable of winning it. That is how you show what a yellow jersey means to a Frenchman on Bastille Day. His legs, I think he just got an attack of cramp.
I think he just buckled up, and that's not surprising. He must have put himself through all kinds of purgatory to get to the top of this climb.
Well done to Thomas Voeckler, who keeps his maillot jaune tonight after a terrific day of racing through the Pyrenees. Sanchez, the Olympic champion, 6 hours is a long time to spend in the saddle. 7 seconds back Van der Nert, 10 seconds to Schleck, 30 to Ivan Basso, and the same time for Cadel Evans. So Cadel Evans concedes 20 seconds to Frank Schleck. That will reverse their positions overall. Andy also at 30 seconds, but look at this, Contador 43. He's lost 13 seconds to Andy Schleck and Cadel Evans. It puts him out now to heading up to 2 minutes behind those riders in the overall. Tommy Danielson rose to the occasion today, only a minute back. Well done to Tommy Danielson. Levi Leipheimer 1:25, he cracked just a little bit. 15th was Hubert Dupont 1:56. All right, well, we'll take a break, but as always, we'll come back, we'll sort everything out, we'll get any interviews available, but there's no doubt who won the stage today. The Olympic champion from Spain. In some people's eyes, they'll think it was the wrong Spanish rider, but I don't. Sammy Sanchez, the winner today. We'll take a break, see you in a moment. The France and Luz Saint-Sauveur is the town below us here. We're sitting right on top in the main mountain of the Pyrenees at Luz Ardiden. And let's have a look at the winner. Here he comes now, Samuel Sanchez. gets a stage victory in the Tour de France, and the Olympic champion now just milking the moment, loving every minute of it as he wins atop the climb. And Robert Lyseka, who was his teammate, was the winner up here last time he finished here as well. The time before Lance Armstrong won, that is. So Euskaltel Euskadi performing in front of a Spanish crowd. There's plenty of French here too, but Spain is literally over the top of the mountain. He deserves it too. He really tried hard. Bernard Hinault just reminding him which way he has to leave the podium to shake hands with everybody. First ever stage win for him in the Tour de France. He's had a lot of shots at it too. Finished 4th in the Tour last year. Let's have a look how it stands now with the Michelob Ultra overall standings. Voigtla keeps his maillot jaune for at least one more day. Schleck is up into 2nd. Cadel Evans holds 3rd, but a different man in 2nd place. Andy Schleck is 4th. Ivan Basso is 5th. Time gaps are reasonably big. Damiano Cunego looking set for a good tour now in 6th. Contador 4 minutes off the yellow jersey. That's a big gap for Alberto Contador, sitting in 7th place. Sanchez is up into 8th. Tommy D is up into 9th at 4:35. Nicholas Roach is in 10th. More we can show you. Gilbert still there after the first day in the mountains in 12th. Peter Velits had his problems but holds 14th. And Levi Leipheimer 17th, but 7:51 down at the moment. Let's see if we can get back to the podium. I think somebody else is coming out. Oh well, it's little Tommy Voigtla. Listen to the cheers. The popular man on French radio last night, we heard him saying he wouldn't be in yellow tonight. Well, Thor Hushovd said it on Norwegian radio when he was the race leader, and he defied the odds as well. This man fought all the way on Bastille Day and has kept his maillot jaune, and tomorrow he might well keep it because we climb the Col du Aubisque, but it's a long way from the top to the finish and it's not up a mountain at the end. So he can dream of another yellow jersey tomorrow as well.